If you're ready, call the order, Trophy Club Mud District 1. We have a quorum, all directors are present. Madam Secretary, are there any citizens' comments?
No.
Hearing none, we'll proceed to the consent agenda. All matters are considered consent agenda. All matters listed as consent agenda are considered to be routine by the Board of Directors and will be enacted by one motion. There will not be a separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Does anyone, item number one, consider and take appropriate action to approve the consent agenda. A, July 2018 check register. B, July 9th special meeting minutes. C, July 16th, 2018 regular meeting minutes. D, July 24th special meeting minutes. E, July 31st, 2018 special meeting minutes. Does anyone like to pull anything out of the consent agenda? Seeing no one,
Go ahead.
Vice President Rose, yep.
I move to approve the consent agenda, items A through E.
We have a motion by Vice President Rose to approve the consent agenda.
I second.
We have a second by Director Chapman. Any comments? Well, there can't be any comments. All in favor, indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously. We enter into regular session. Consider and take appropriate action regarding fiscal year budget 2019 budget matters. A, consider and take appropriate action regarding rate assumptions and projections for fiscal year 2019 budget. B, consider and take appropriate action regarding draft number 2 of fiscal year 2019 budget. Staff?
Mr. President, thank you. Start off with just trying to frame up item number 2 in a concise way. You had brought to my attention last year that, in fact, we approved the rate increase before we approved the budget, which we kind of did. Although, at the end of the day, the budget is, in fact, an input to the rate-making process. So, our intention here with item number 2 is really kind of twofold. A, to, and this is not, I should say single I, is to let you know what small changes have happened in the budget since we last met. And B, to clarify for everybody's purposes, what are the assumptions going into the rate-making process. So, for example, the district was subject to an agreement resulting from the Public Utility Commission hearing of a couple years ago that suggested that we would push forward winter quarter averaging and the tiering of winter quarter averaging through May of this year. In the process of going into the rate-making process, where we intend to bring back recommendations for the board in September, we are telling the board that we, as staff, are not making any assumptions that we will not go forward with winter quarter averaging as a method for creating the wastewater side of the revenue coin. That's an assumption on our part that the board currently has no interest in deviating from the path that we have gone down over the last 12 to 24 months. But staff felt like it was important to clarify the agreement we entered into with the petitioners to the PUC was really done back in March, April, May timeframe. We believe that that it's appropriate to move forward with that same rate-making methodology. It's really just the second year, but it is in fact an assumption going into that rate-making process. So our board has constructed a rate committee. It's not a unanimous decision, but we do have a rates subcommittee, and it's our intention to take, let's say, draft number 2 of this year's budget and a couple of key assumptions into that rate-making process, and then bring back what will be the staff and hopefully the rate committee's final recommendations to the board in September vis-a-vis revenue rates. So that's mainly the purpose here, just to present with you the changes we've made in the FY19 budget pursuant to our discussion. I want to say that was at a special meeting of the board. And then B, to say we are not anticipating changing away from the winter quarter averaging. This was the second year we've done that. I think it went pretty smoothly this year. I mean, relatively speaking, relatively smoothly. So unless the board wants to tell us to take a different direction on that, staff is going into the rate-making process with the assumption that we'll continue down the path that we embarked upon 18 to 24 months ago. With that kind of Carmen diatribe, I'll turn it over to Stephen. Do you want to point out any kind of big changes in the draft budget year over year? And
Draft budget.
We'll start with the rate study first.
sorry, let's start with the rate study first.
Do I need to state my name and my address?
Where do you live?
All right. Thank you for seeing us, board. All right, I do want to go over some information here. I've got with Nugent, got with Chris. I thought there wasn't a real reason to have him here tonight, so I want to kind of go over. Hopefully, I can do justice for his PowerPoint. He's helped put us together here. So a few different things going on right now. One of the main topics we had last year was the water having subsidized for wastewater. The wastewater wasn't able to fully budget its own purposes there. Last time we were at 24%, so water was going to cover part of that. So we're going to do 12% and 12% again this year for wastewater side.
I thought the residential was at 24 and the commercial was at 17.
I'm talking about where water is covering the revenues versus wastewater covering its revenue, its budget side for the
It was
revenues.
short.
So short, correct.
Wastewater was
Having
short.
deficit of 24%. And then we were going to use 12%, have water subsidize some of the wastewater coverage and overage that we needed. Does that make sense, or am I
It was
following?
the coverage came across the residential sewer covered itself, if I remember correctly, from the rates, because we had an increased usage volume, which would have driven down the cost per 1,000 gallons to process it. And we left it up, but that carried it up to the 24% that we were looking for, that we needed.
Right.
The commercial needed an increase, and the decision of the board was not to increase it.
Correct.
And so then that delta, the difference where it needed to be from where it was then funded from the water side of the equation.
Director Rose, I think we're going to get there in
Okay.
this presentation. So let me just say two things. Number one, if you just look at the two funds as a whole, water versus sewer, water was over-recovering, and that provided the possibility for the board to just say, look, we don't think that it makes sense to be herky-jerky and raise rates in one year and reduce them in another year because it's over-recovered. And because there's a 24% revenue increase need on the wastewater side, that we're going to try to avoid rate shock with the customers. And again, I've been here 12 months now, so that was in my first board meeting with you all. And my memory is not as good as it used to be, I will be the first to admit. But my recollection is if you just look at the water fund versus the wastewater fund without respect to the distinction between commercial versus residential, and we'll get into that wastewater had a big need for revenue sufficiency. Water was okay, and the rate consultant recommended, let's try to do rate smoothing to avoid rate shock for our customers. We are going to get into this with respect to just one thing. I'll try to simplify it from my own simpleton perspective. We asked Stephen and our rate consultant to kind of take our preliminary budget, stick it in, and show about where we are. Now, there are still some budget refinements to come. We expect some small refinements around fire budget, around some other things as we go, but we're getting close, right? We're honing in on where we need to be. And Stephen is going to present to you his findings working with NewGen about what it looks like going into the rate-making process in terms of the particular disparity you're talking about, which is commercial versus residential on the wastewater side of the coin. And we'll look at all of those things in the next 7 slides. That said, our only point today is to present the revised budget, to tell you kind of this is what it looks like going into it, and then we're going to bring back a set of recommendations for you in September.
Okay, so we'll start with the slides here. So the overall rates, revenue is.
Steven, sorry, I know you're kind of focused. Would you introduce Desiree to our crowd? She's behind you and has brought you something, and maybe you can read.
Everybody, this is Desiree. This is our new staff accountant here.
Hi, how are you?
I started to stay a little longer today to make some copies here for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Desiree. Have a nice evening.
All right, so we're going to start here. So the overall recovery is we're a significant source of revenue to cover all of our budget here. We're looking at about 230,000 of full recovery here from the water side. We actually have a deficit of 120,000 roughly for the wastewater side to cover it based on the current rates. Once again, I talked with Chris. We did the current rates that we have now, and looking forward, doing the same exact thing for winter average for next year without changing anything. We can get to that topic later. We have a potential need to increase the wastewater rates to recover the costs, and they also align with the cost allocation methodology, which is make sure the commercial is paying for itself and residents aren't having to decide for that. So we're going to go. Wrong one. Maybe. Do that way. All right, so as far as the meter efficiency, just slightly before my time, we kind of put together a program to match up with the AWWA recommendations. We were going to do it at a 3-year. So basically, you're taking equivalent factor. We're going to take it at a factor of a 5/8 meter, do the calculation for the flow of the GPM, and do basically, you're going to do a percentage or ratio so all the other meters to match up for it. So if you change a 5/8, $1 for instance, your 1 inch goes and changes 2.5, your 1.5 is 5, and so on. So we went ahead and looked at what we had, where we are now. So if you look at the middle slide here, at 17.15 is our base charge. That's where we are now. And then these are all of our current rates going down the middle column here. These are the percentages of the current efficiency that we are. If you go to AWWA standards, if you look on the next column here, these are the increases that we would still need to match the AWWA we looked at 3 years prior. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Are we in year 2 of 3?
Technically, we're in year 3 of 3. This should have been the year we would have done it. We didn't move enough over the last 2 years. We kind of want to step into it, but we didn't do enough of an increase to match up to it. So if you look on the right column here, this shows you how far off we will be. If you look in the middle column, it shows you our percentages compared to the column in the far left on the differences as far as what allocation you're looking at differences.
Mr. President, let me just add that that question came up in our last board meeting. And based on my understanding from Chris that we were on a 3-year schedule to meet this pattern, if that's the right term. You know, for me, I think about this as being a revenue sufficiency question that also is related to readiness to serve, right? So if you've got a 5/8 inch meter with 50 PSI of pressure, you can get 20 gallons per minute. If you got a 1 inch meter with the same pressure differential, you can get 50 gallons per minute. So we're going to charge the base fee to some extent on the readiness to serve, right? That capacity is available to you. We're pretty close on the low end of the structure, but we are not as close as I led the board to believe in our last meeting on the upper end of that structure. I think that's what I had to say.
I'm going to assume in a future slide, you will have the number of customers that are at the various levels. Okay.
I'll give you, it's a percentages.
Percentages,
Yes,
yeah.
correct. So if everybody's good on this, we can actually move on to that slide here. All right, so if you look here, here's our percentage, as Mr. President was talking about here. So we have the average monthly connections. This is projected for next year. And then we have the percentage of connections that are in each area. These other ones are at 0%. Obviously, there is a percent there, but it's a small percent that's there. It's less than 1%. So they make a little bit of difference as you see the monthly connections there. So the options we have is to consider following the AWWA standard with the 5/8, or we can move the equivalents up to a 1 inch starting as our base. And I'll kind of go to the next slide showing you the difference in the cost allocation would be for the base rates if we do that. You any questions on this slide, Mr. President?
Stephen, I don't know if there isn't some confusion around so we're pretty close on our budgeted revenue and budget expenses for next year. Your general manager has recommended that we not do a zero increase for next year, but that we maybe focus on a small adjustment in the fixed fee with a narrative for our rate-paying customers that relates to A, the cost of replacing a pipeline has nothing to do with how much water went through it, and therefore it should be in the fixed fee. And we all know that we're anticipating in the coming fiscal year that we're going to finalize our reserve policy. We'd like to see a small increase to the base fee, kind of, dedicated, at least by intention on our board, towards pipeline replacements. We see a lot of that coming up, being a small change in the base fee. So what you won't see here is a recommendation for a volumetric fee change. But, when we talk about things like, should the 5/8 or 1 inch be the standard equivalent? What happens if we add a small base fee? You'll see that in this presentation. That's really coming from staff. I just want you to know
I
that.
haven't quite got to that slide yet, so I want to kind of start based on what we have our fixed rates currently now. Yes, sir.
Could you address equivalency 5/8 to 1 inch?
So right now, we're comparing the AWWA standard to the 5/8.
Okay,
Instead of going to the 5/8, we have the option, we can move our base to be the 1 inch.
okay. And communities around us, I see, and this is a question for Mike. We have 5/8 listed here. Do we have 3/4 inch meters out there also?
No, just
Okay.
5/8.
Just 5/8. Okay. I see communities around us that consider 5/8 and 1 inch the same. Some do, some don't, some have different things. So just based on that, I'll let you go ahead.
Okay.
Let's clarify one thing. As I understand it, oftentimes 5/8 inch meters are described as 5/8 by 3/4.
Correct.
So
Okay.
I don't know if that means like the 3/4 is on our end of the connection, 5/8 is on the customer end of the connection, or vice versa. But a lot of times you'll see the 5/8 inch meter described as a by 3/4 inch.
One of the other things I'll clarify, and correct me if I'm wrong, a majority of the 5/8 inch would be in the old part of Trophy Club, and on the new side of Trophy Club, that's where most of the 1 inch ones are, correct? Would that be an accurate statement?
Yeah, the newer developments will have 1 inch because a 1 inch meter is our standard now. We don't set a 5/8 meter anymore unless that subdivision was already set up for them. I mean, all the new developments, the PID, anything in the mud, a 1 inch meter is a standard now.
So for the purpose of this discussion, when you say equivalency, are you saying that the equivalency would be the base rate and it would be 1 inch? If you had a 5 inch meter, you would pay the equivalency number, whatever that would be.
Next question.
So if you look in, we can go in and go forward here. I'll go back a slide. Let's see where these slides are at. It might be going forward. So let's continue on, and I'll answer the question as
Okay.
we move on to slides here. So as we go forward here, let's look at the meter equivalency and the fixed charges here. So on the first column, you see the fixed charges. And then if we move the fixed charge to the 1 inch equivalency, this is what the fixed charge will now be based on the allocation of it. So basically, we're going to take the 1 inch that we have now, keep the fixed charge there, back the 5/8 down, and then continue going forward to meet AWWA standards. And then if you look at the next chart here, on the far outside, you have the fixed charge under the 5/8. And this is basically to help impact the businesses and institutions like churches and schools that have larger meters. This is basically helping the small percentage that we have that's over. Now, as President Wilson just said, though, the newer meters in the PID, it's going to heavily affect them if we go off the 5/8 for the AWWA standard. And say, for instance, as Carmen was stating, we raise the base charge up $1, it's going to impact a lot of our customers. It's going to actually impact more than half our customers with the 1 inch meters that we have. Or it's
3%?
43%, correct. So as Carmen was stating before, if we increase it for $1 in our fixed charge, here's the estimated generation is going to charge for revenue sources. So if we do let's say we keep it to the 5/8 that we have right now, moving up $1, you're gonna get about 480,000 more in the water side in revenue. If we do the sewer on the same thing, you're gonna obviously get about 50,000. So a total of, you're looking at about 530,000 for moving up $1, starting with the 5/8 as the base equivalency. If we did it with the equivalency of a 1 inch instead, you see a significantly difference there. Anybody have any questions on that slide?
I think the next slide,
Next slide is gonna be more
don't you
of a-
summarize it? Yeah.
Correct, and summarize it down.
Yeah,
So the options we have is,
Again, let me just, this being driven by me, it's my understanding in the past, we've put forth a plethora of options for board consideration. I'd like to narrow it down to 3 or 4. Just like to kind of bracket the range of opportunities. And again, we're going into the rate-making process, not making a recommendation here. So we try to say, well, Stephen, hey, let's put up kind of some sideboards. One end is the do-nothing alternative. The other end is like, let's, start at this equivalency. And before we get to that, let me ask Mike one question just for the record. If someone is in the older part of town with a 5/8 inch meter and we replace it, are we replacing it with a 1 or the 5/8 by 3/4?
5/8.
So we're leaving it with its original capacity, likely driven by the size of the lateral, right?
The service line coming up, yes.
as Carmen stated, we have 3 options here. Now, when you look at the budget, for where everything's projected, it looks like we're going to have, we're budgeted to between the water and the wastewater together, we're budgeted, in taxes, we're budgeted to have a surplus for the budget. So this would be moving this increase, as Carmen was stating, this is more about building our reserves to infrastructure replacement as years come by, without getting behind. So this is kind of a way to operate, or to generate a little more revenue to go in and kind of help fund for future infrastructure replacement.
So this is in addition to the 400,000 that we're already setting aside as part of reserve, correct?
So right now, we have 400,000, correct. This would be additional to that. That's correct. In which we talked about a little bit last meeting, about increasing that to increase our reserves that way. Yes, sir.
Just quickly looking back, it's page 2 of your display there, about current equivalency. We go from 1.0 to 1.88 when we drove up to the 1 inch meter. If that's held at 88%, I just grabbed one of the other, the 15 down there, and if you held that at the 88% level, it would be 13.2. So, I mean, just another balloon to throw up in the air, to throw rocks at, would be to increase those that are greater 1 inch up to the 88% level.
Okay.
And I don't know what impact that would have on the ultimate revenue, but
It seems like it's small numbers, but I don't know.
yeah, it gets driven by the number of users.
Mm-hmm.
It's a multiple,
Yeah.
and it happens monthly, so it does generate a fund.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
So going here to the summary of board options that we have here, I'm not exactly sure page number, but it shows you the cost for equivalent of 1 inch versus the 5/8. I say we stick with the 5/8 for discussion right now, just so we can kind of talk right there, and then we'll go to the 1 inch. So if we look at the 5/8 equivalency, we raise the 5/8 to $1, taking the cost allocation of everything, going down the list, this is what we're looking at each meter to go to. And then the bottom is a fixed sewer charge for $1 increase on there. The other option is to go with option 2, which is equivalency of 1 inch, and then just raising, once again, the 5/8 to $1, but also raising the 1 inch to $1, and then doing the equivalency all the way down from there. The recommendation, it would send mixed signals if we didn't increase at least a 5/8 with the 1 inch to $1, instead of, reducing it down to 13, because you're re-equilibrating it back to a 1 inch, instead of sticking with the 5/8.
I didn't follow that. Say that again, Stephen.
So if you look at, it's still, if we go with the 1 inch option, and if you go a couple slides back, you'll see, if we went with the 1 inch, it actually, based on the calculation that we have, if you did the cost allocation on the equivalency of it, it would knock the base down of the 5/8 but it was sending the signals having us go back in the 5/8 to make up, because we're trying to do a 1-inch equivalency. So we would continue on with the base rate we have now for the 5/8, increase it $1, then do the equivalency for the 1-inch. If you look on this slide here, so you have option number 2, which is increase the 5/8 by $1, increase the 1-inch by $1, and then do the equivalency factor for the rest of them off the 1-inch. Has some confusing looks on there.
No, I understand what's happening. I guess one of the questions is, was the goal in just starting with a $1 increase to the 5/8 just to do shared pain versus just going to the AWWA standard and kind of continue along that path?
Right, if we look solely at this particular option, we are not there on the 6-inch meter. There's only 2 of them in the system, but that would be a pretty significant base rate increase for those folks. So we still have a little ways to get back to that pattern of equivalency between meters, right? And it's established, as we discussed in that earlier slide, like, you know, for a given pressure differential and a 5/8/3/4 inch meter, you get this much water. You go up to the next one, you get this much.
Yeah.
They're not directly proportional to the cross-sectional areas of the meters, which is what I had thought originally. This gets a little confusing because of my own lack of understanding that our base equivalency was not the 1-inch, but rather the 5/8. So that's what the board directed the staff to work off of 2 years ago, was the 5/8 meter, to get the, you know, to get the proportionality between meters and base fees the same over a 3 or so year period. And again, I reported that at the last meeting that we were either on our way there or almost there. That's true at the, you know, what's effectively 90+% of the meters. But we're still behind on some of those big meters. I mean, they could go up $200 a month in a base fee. Given the size of those accounts, that may not be that big of an increase. But, you know, my notion is that we put forward a very conservative budget to go into the rate-making process. That I believe that our budget needs go up at least by the cost of living next year at a minimum. And I'm recommending just a small adjustment to the fixed fee with no volumetric change going into the rate-making process with a range of outcomes, which the rate committee will look at with our consultant and come back. But we just wanted to give you kind of a heads-up look at what that would look like. If we put $1 on the 5/8 meter or we put it on the 1, it creates a difference in that pattern. And putting it on the 1 was my mistake, because I thought we were set to have that be our equivalent meter. That's not the case. The board directed us to do it on the 5/8 meter. So our rates consultant, Nujan, and Stephen have worked diligently to try to, you know, meet with my confusing sort of interests. My only point today is to kind of give you kind of a preliminary look at what that would look like based on our current budget projection, and just a simple statement of let's put $1 on water base fee, $1 on sewer base fee, and conceptually describe that to our consumers like, we're going to replace more pipe in the coming year. That's what that money's for. So, just to keep it simple.
But the point would be, if you add $1 to each one of those fees, that's one item. But if you turn around and run it through the equivalency equation, then when you go to a 5/8, that's not adding $1. That's adding $10. So
Or
you're
$2.
Or you're doing 2 things.
Certainly for the 6-inch meters, it's a big chunk of money.
Yeah, well, but and here again, to use an overriding theory or approach on it, I could, you know, we're trying to build up reserves is basically what's going on. I can see the addition of the $1 to the 5/8 and the 1-inch, but for the others, I want to drive to that 1.88%. Would be, now I understand when we add $1 to the 5/8, it's going to, the 1.88 is going to come down. It's going to be something less than 1.88 on the 1-inch meter, but even at that, I would be driving to the same percentage to at least show some consistency through the rate structure, would be what I would driving at.
Well,
Tony's got a curious look.
I don't understand the 1.88 for larger meter sizes, because it's all theoretically based on the amount of flow through the meter, and somebody that uses more capacity should pay a greater amount of cost. So if that's your theory, a 1.5-inch meter should be paying 3.32, not 1.88, et cetera.
Well, but the point, what I did is I did the multiplier across, and what I found was those meters of a larger size weren't holding even to a 1.88%. They were below it. So I wanted to bring them up to, at least the same percentage, those below. The larger size meters.
I mean, maybe the meters aren't properly sized, but in theory, the people are paying for the capacity that's available to them based on their meter size. Because by
That's
placing
the
that meter,
goal.
I'm sorry?
The AWWA goal is to do that, yes,
And rate making is to allocate costs based on capacity,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
So I think that's fair, and we were looking for that kind of direction and input for our rate committee, subcommittee members as we go into this process.
Before,
Yeah.
go to slide 6 again, if you don't mind, Steve.
Well, I don't think that's
no,
direction.
that's
That's
not
an
direction.
observation
I'm sorry,
by
which
one
one's six?
director.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, this is, can you go over these again? Because you talked about a plethora of options before. Are these the 3 that we are considering?
No.
Or,
What they're doing is, they're just laying out 3 that he said, this is my idea. So today, we aren't considering anything. He's just showing us these are basically 3 ideas that he had, but ultimately, when the rate committee get together, we can consider these
Yeah.
3 or 3 new ones.
So Stephen,
Correct.
the draft budget that you're going to show the board, does it incorporate any of these options?
It does not. So my draft budget I have right now is based on what we have. This is gonna be the increase of the budget I have. So I'm going off of no change, stating with my draft budget.
Option number 1.
Option number 1 of no change, and then we would see the increase, okay, now we have 150,000 and 530,000 additional on top of that draft.
In which case, we would budget the additional revenue in those revenue line items for those budgets. Like, here's some extra
Correct. I mean,
money.
it's obviously gonna change the budget, but as Carmen and I were speaking, and the understanding is to use that for reserves, so that will go in the line item for infrastructure replacement for reserves. So instead of the 200,000 per department, we would increase those departments based on what they bring in and move that towards infrastructure.
We'll balance it by budgeting additional money to reserves.
Yes.
Correct. And then, so heavily, most of this is gonna come obviously from the water side. So the water side will have more reserves. And as speaking with Carmen, we feel that the water infrastructure replacement is gonna be more significant in future years than it would be the wastewater side, as we're already going through the plant improvements and everything.
So next month, when you bring back a budget for consideration by the board, in terms of rate revenues, will it be based on staff's discussions with the committee?
Correct. That's the next step later tonight, talk about when to meet the next committee. I need to have some sort of direction or parameters that we wanna go. I'll get with Chris, we'll run scenarios, we'll get what we need to get together, and then that's part of having the committee. We'll sit down, we'll probably have, my recommendation as a staff, have a few meetings here coming soon, so then we can start building the budget based on what the committee and the staff has kind of gone with, and then we can present that as a budget itself.
So basically, I think we're all on the same page or understand, what we want to do tonight at this point is to give guidance going forward on how what the process looks like, how it will be built. So,
You know, a lot of this kind of drove, and President Wilson was talking about in the last meeting, was asking about, are we there at the AWWA standard yet, or where are we at from there? So a lot of this is to give you an idea of where we are right now versus 3 years ago when you was elected to try to meet the standards of AWWA. And then if we were to increase it, let's see what an increase would do versus on the standards that we're going there now. So these are, once again, this is just give you some information. $1 seemed to be an easy increase to kind of show, and to show what percentage that we have the new meters are going to be. For instance, here, so we can all understand the percentage of meters that we have, and then what one cost would do versus a 5/8 versus a dollar, I'm sorry, 5/8 versus the 1 inch, and which direction we want to go from there.
Mr. President, to maybe answer Tony's question in a slightly different way, we are pretty confident about where we're at with respect to the expenditure side of the water and sewer fund budgets. What we're really talking about here is the budget for contribution to reserve. So, if we go with the zero option, do nothing option, then it's really going to look like what the budget that we see today. If we decide to add a little bit more to the base fee, maybe the rates committee says, well, let's add it to the wastewater base fee, but not the water this year. I mean, that could happen. We just want to bring back a finite set of options for board consideration, for full board consideration. And we wanted to give you a little bit of a telegraph so you know what it looked like going in to the process, and we get a sense of where the board was relative to that, so that our rates subcommittee can give us good advice on something we can bring back that we think everybody will be able to buy into.
And then a lot of this,
Sorry if I,
Sure.
just a question. I understand right now we're replacing 5/8, 5/10 like for like because of the infrastructure under the road. But are we not sooner or later going to be replacing that infrastructure under the road for the water pipes? Because that is the oldest section of town. I assume that's where the new stuff will start coming in. When we start putting in new pipe, for feeders and that stuff, will that not also change the meters? The meters will go up to 1 inch?
Usually not, because right now their houses on their service lines and everything, they're plumbed for that 5/8 meter. So then it's either we incur the cost of, plumbing their line in and being, responsible for that for the next, say, year or two, rather than,
And Mike, correct me if I'm,
I had to understand.
No,
what it is.
no,
Yeah,
no,
okay,
no.
yeah.
I think the size of the meter is generally dictated under the plumbing code based on the fixture count of within the house. So I would think most of the houses that were originally plumbed with a 5/8 inch was based on the fixture count and would presumably be replaced with the 5/8 inch unless there were bathroom construction or expansions or something like that. So I think that's what drives it more, is the number of fixtures within a house under the plumbing code.
Okay, so we would be replacing the mains like for like as well in the future.
No, not quite, because I think the fire code has actually changed. So for example, I think on Phoenix, which we've just redone, we put in a larger main than we had before. But I'm not aware that either from a policy perspective or from a staff perspective, we've said, well, this is a great time to switch from a 5/8 to a 1. We haven't done that. Although I think if somebody asked us to, we could do that. We just haven't done it from a policy perspective.
there's another factor to figure in there too, is our base rate. So if we just say, hey, we're shoving a 1-inch meter in here now you're gonna be paying this on your base rate. That homeowner didn't want it. We're probably gonna get a lot of
Oh, yeah.
negative feedback there. But I mean, at that time, if a homeowner did come up to us and say, hey, you're replacing this, I would like a 1-inch meter. I mean, we could do that for them. The standard size now, though, when we replace pipes, I mean, all the 6-inch AC and everything, we don't go back with a 6-inch pipe. Everything's just a 8-inch standard now.
Yeah, I just wondered if, when time comes to replace that infrastructure, whether we're gonna have to worry about that kind of stuff. Obviously not. Okay.
Well, rate making has a lot of art to it, as well as science, and I guess one of the underlying things we're pointing at here is we could just say that we're gonna try to find the same base rate for 1s and 5/8. That would be the same base rate for more than 90% of our connections, or something along those lines, but it's really hard to do that in accordance with AWWA profiles, because they make a distinction between those. And in some communities, there's a bigger distribution of meters than what we have here with just 2 basic rate classes.
Thank you.
and so another reason with raising the dollar is it does help wastewater cover some of its deficit that it has. So if we were to raise it, you're looking at $50-some thousand, it'll help cover some of the deficit. Because right now, wastewater, based on the projections that we have, keeping everything standard and keeping the rates the same, we're looking at a little more than 117,000 deficit on the wastewater to cover its own expenses. So if we were to raise it $1, let's say for just, for also for the sewer meters, we're looking at now the deficit going down to 63,000. So you knock it down a percentage. So some of this kind of helps allocate, make sure that the wastewater is paying for its own way too.
We're talking about two things here. When you talk about wastewater, we're talking about two things. We're talking about, in the case of water, we're talking about adding to raise funds for reserves.
Correct.
But when we talk about wastewater, what I hear you saying is we're talking about doing that to offset current operating costs.
Correct.
No, that's
But
one
that's
way to
already
look
being
at it.
covered
That's
without
one.
changing anything.
Well, not in wastewater, it was short.
No. What I'm saying is, right now, I'm not fighting that battle. What I'm saying is that if we do nothing, then the budget is balanced. Water is subsidizing some of the wastewater, so by doing this,
Gotcha,
this
yeah.
is purely reserve, has nothing to do
Okay.
with recovering revenue to make sure the budget is balanced.
Yeah,
subsidy does exist.
Yes, it exists today.
yeah. So, like I said, I've expressed where I'm at. I'd add $1 to the 5/8 and to the 1 inch, and the others I would increase to that. Take a look and see what happens going to 1.8 to the 1.8, whatever the correct percentage is here.
You talking about for the
Because those
current
will be increased.
percentages right now? So the 1.8, you talking about this one right here in the middle
Yep,
slide?
yep.
So 1.8 is where we currently are now.
Yep.
Okay.
But if you take the 1.8 and multiply it times the 5.0, or the 0.88 times 5.0, I think you come up with something probably slightly more than 3.32. I checked the one down at 15 and got a larger number.
So you're saying run the dollar but running on the current ratio that we have now, instead of going towards the AWA? Instead of going
Yeah, I
forward
would,
with that.
I hate to fall in the same boat that the president falls into when he talks about increasing commercial sewer rates, but I hate to come back and hit the residents, the 1-inch meter residents, again, because that looks like it's totally focused on the pit. Now, the board may decide at a later date to come back and move those up, but a large jump, a $10 jump, you're talking $120, you're $120 a year. That's a significant amount, and it's all base. I mean, you can't control it, and that gets into one of the discussions about what costs should be in base, what costs should be in volume, and that's an interesting discussion within the arena. And I can see people. I've seen an example where the city took it from a large number down to like $6 for base rates on water and sewer and put everything in volumetric. For the board's understanding, and perhaps those watching, if you have really good reserves, you can do something like that because your exposure is greater and you have the reserves to cover it. If I put something in volumetric and I don't sell it, it's not really a big problem on the sewer side now that we're with winter average. But on the water side, if I put something in volumetric and we have a wet year, then the mud has to have reserves to cover the costs that it's going to incur. So that becomes one of the driving factors between base and volumetric. It's part of the art and science.
And also within that, within a rate-making process, if you talk to the rate consultants, their preference would be have your base rate cover your fixed costs.
Correct.
And have the volumetric rate cover your variable costs.
Yep.
So there's a couple of different approaches to go about that.
Yep.
Would you like to sit down one day, Mr.
That's right.
We can get you a chair.
They all look good, the trim face. And
Yeah, I'm just going to throw in there, Greg, you're right on the money. So there's two things there that hopefully we'll consider with the rate committee. One is, if the GPM for whatever the pressure differential is 20 for 5/8 and 50 for 1, maybe you just fix a number somewhere in between there, like 35 for both meter sets, and say, is there a base fee for 5/8 or 1s? And we scale it up accordingly. And then on the other side of it, the costs of replacing pipelines, we're doing Phoenix now, we're going to be in Indian Creek soon. We've got in the budget next year Carnoustie, and I want to say two other joint projects with the town.
They budgeted this year, though. There's gonna be a
So those will be
carryover.
carryovers, but nonetheless, we're gonna be doing some projects that we need to do, even if the town's not gonna do it. But the cost of replacing those pipelines has nothing to do with how much water went through them. And so, in my mind, that fits with the base fee. And we're in a year where we push forward as a staff, thanks to the team's help, a conservative budget. So, my feeling is that we shouldn't go forward with no rate increase. We should have at least a token rate increase, and that rate increase should be tied to what we see as our big drivers coming up in the near term, pipeline replacements.
And there's no reason we can't say we're gonna do $1 for the sewer and do 50 cents for the water based on that. I mean, we can change it up. It's just trying to give a scenario so everybody can understand what it would do, what impact it would have on, and where we are. So not only where we want this to understand the AWWA and where we are going forward, we also want to address, Mr. Vice President's concern, which was the cost allocation for resident versus commercial and what percentage we were at. So this slide tells you where we are now, fairly close. This is what the current flow that we have for the plant over the last 12 months. Fairly close for where we were before, 1% off from residential and commercial.
So pretty much where we were with the last couple of years.
Correct.
That's 73.27.
So if we were to look at the rate and what it would do to the commercial, and I know the concern that Mr. President's gonna have here is it would increase the commercial rate from $5.92 to $6.28 to cover that.
Oh, it's easy.
That's easy. Now it's balanced out and meets the statutes.
Yeah, easy from the guy that's not paying it. But if you think 2 years ago, they went from 284 to 592, which was over
Yeah.
120% increase.
Yeah, and that was because the residential was carrying them.
I completely agree. Didn't have a problem with that.
Yeah, so I don't have a problem.
Okay.
What the percentages reflect, that's, from my perspective, that's what we do.
Okay. So we leave the commercial the same where it's at now?
No, commercial
change it
goes
to-
up.
Okay.
Commercial goes up to,
We can certainly take that into this rate-making process with our
Yes.
committee, understanding that there's gonna be a range of opinions from our board. We just wanted to give you a sense of going in, Stephen is learning how to run the rate model. I never am gonna recommend that he do that officially, but we do wanna be able to contemplate, the impact of capital expenses out 4 or 5 years, what impact on our projected rate increases that has. And he's been learning it. It's actually a pretty complicated model with all the pieces in it, including our tax revenues. But at the end of the day, we just wanted to be upfront with the board about, if we just make some simple assumptions, this is what it looks like. And we're planning on bringing something fairly similar back to you all in September after the advice and consent of our rates subcommittee.
Any questions for anybody?
just real quickly, I'll quote the two associated statutes. Water Administration, Water Rights, Water Rates and Services, Title II, Section 13182B. Rates shall not be unreasonably preferential, prejudicial, or discriminatory, but shall be sufficient, equitable, and consistent in application to each class of customers, and the Texas Administrative Code 291.87F, last sentence, a method of separating customers by class shall be adopted so as to apply rates that will accurately reflect the cost of service to each customer class. And that's where I'm coming from. Next.
Duly noted.
Next.
Any other questions or comments on 2?
Stephen, I know you're going to talk about taxes on your next go-around. Is that the place to talk about the small tweaks in the fire budget, or is that something we should have done under item 2?
Under 2B? 2B or not to be?
Sorry, I thought we were
That is the
moving on to 3.
question.
Too soon.
I know he was gonna say something like that.
I got lots of questions. Oh, this is a new one?
I was say.
This has also been emailed, if you wanna see it through your email. Move it out for as we get in the meeting here.
Hey, I sprung for the 3:30.
I saw the title page, I just need to know what's changed.
And it may be on your desktop.
No, it's not. I
It's
just
not.
got it too. Right.
Yeah, everybody,
Okay.
I'm sorry, everybody, this got out late today,
Yep.
this is on me.
Amended, proposed, amended. Oh, I see what he's done. He put another column in.
I suspect that's Desiree, that color.
He's put another column in. That's right, yeah.
I'm thinking this is Ray, not.
Oh,
So, go ahead, okay. So there's actually two separate sections here on this handout. The first section, of the first, I think, 6 pages, so here, is going to be the general fund. If you look at the items and highlight it, these are gonna be the items that are changed based on our last, workshop that we had. One of the biggest differences here is going to be the, CPI, that we changed that for the COLA. So these are your difference in your salaries based on that. The next concern that we had.
did you wind up on that CPI?
Right now, it's at 3.9 that we talked about. I'm watching it right now. It changed. It's about 3.5 is what they're showing. So
Okay.
we'll make an altercation as we get closer to doing the budget if you want to,
Well, just my thought process on that would just,
Altercation or alteration?
Yeah, let's make an alteration.
just,
If it goes down, there's gonna be altercation.
just pick,
We'll get Bill that.
just pick a standard. It's what I'm,
No.
say, okay, from now on, we're gonna do it based on the July reading. That's the number we're gonna take and capture. Every July, each time we go through budget, we'll take the July reading, back 12 months, and that's what, however,
Okay.
just a standard.
And the next one's gonna be, is the concern that we had last time, which is gonna be the cleaning of the water and the wastewater plant. Right now, these are rates that we have based on the annual year here, looking at doing it 2 times a month. So basically, each week, we'd have the cleaning on top of our building, go in and clean the plant, one of the other plants at the same time. This will give us some cleaning there. So basically, we'll say we'll do it on Saturday, once a week, they'll come in and clean wastewater treatment plant this week, next week they clean the water plant, and then the next week they'll start back over the wastewater treatment plant. And then here's your difference in the total projected increase is on the very last page of it. As you can see, we still right now have a surplus of 252. We are still working on the capital side to get some final numbers, so this can change as we move along. But this is kind of where we're projected right now based on rates being exactly where they are now, going forward, and with everything else staying the same on there.
Okay.
The next one's gonna be a little bit bigger of a topic as far as changes are concerned. I didn't want to put it on one page because then it gets really, really, really hard to read. It's just not hard enough as it is. So if you look on here, you'll see the fire. I just recently got information on Friday that the projections that were associated with the town for how much they were gonna get for the, basically how much they were gonna get for the permits, the fire sprinkler permits and inspections on there, is at one time they were projected to reach about 200,000, as we talked about. Originally, we looked at it showing 65,000, and then we later, as we talked, they were gonna reach and get a little bit higher. We were gonna use that to help cover everything. The final numbers came in, they're looking at no more than 90,000. It was a difference in the input of numbers. It was a mistake that was caught on their end. They updated what they got on me. So we're,
Did they get any detail about the mistake? Was it a volume number mistake?
the
Was it?
mistake was the multiplier per square footage.
So they went from 200,000 to 300,000 and 90.
Well, they went from originally 90-something, 95,000. They said, well, that was a soft estimate. We're actually gonna reach about 200,000. We're just not sure which year we're gonna get it. And then they came back and said, no, we messed up in the numbers. It is 90,000 is the most we're gonna
But
get
at some
for it.
point, it was 65, right? When,
Well, they were only constantly showing 65 for
65
this
for-
fiscal year, not knowing when it was gonna actually come in.
Because they thought some of it was gonna come in this year, and they
Some
were
are gonna come in
thinking
this year
65.
and maybe alter more, further on in the future, but this is what they're confident, at some point in time, this, in the fiscal year, they should reach close to, now, they say they can't guarantee it, this is something that was disclosed to me, and what we went back and forth to make sure, there's a magic number we have to hit, because we all know about the rollback rate and the fire being 90% of our O&M budget. And that is a huge impact on how the rollback rate hits. So we had talked to him about what is the number that we really need to show there so we can take care of this and make the rates look right. And keep the fire rate down enough to keep the rollback. So 90,000 was the number, which is basically what they are projecting to be their max, comfortably what their max is gonna be. Their disclosure is, I say their, the budget disclosure of the town is, we might not hit that full number. If we don't hit that number, when we do a true up in fiscal year 19, they're, say they only hit 60,000, then we would have to do a true up to the 30,000 that wasn't brought in from the town, that would have to come out of reserves. So I just want
So
to say
we-
that as a disclosure.
Fire department.
So we're, okay, so you'll get down to that next.
So now since there's a mistake on their end, Chief Carroll came to me and said, look, I want to make this right. I want to do the best I can. Let me take my budget. Let me trim as much as I can. Let me get actual numbers. They got actual numbers for the percentage increase of their other benefits. They got some other numbers there. So they want to alter their numbers. This is the set in stone as of Friday afternoon. I just got these official numbers. So these are what they're looking at. So some numbers went down, some numbers slightly increased, but the overall budget for the fire did go down. And we can walk through each one. I'm not sure if you want to look at each one here. Obviously, with the tax assessment here, so we started with the first one, which is going to be the assessment for emergency services. That's actually pretty much correlated with the total budget, and so is the assessment emergency for the tax for the MUD side. So both of these are basically tax revenues coming in based on what tax rate that we set for the O&M side of the fire. So those numbers decrease because the overall budget decreased. Those numbers will decrease with it. We talked about the 90,000 on there. Next one down here is 75,000, and that is going to come from prior year reserves. So what we talked about before is the two capital items that they had on their budget. One was for the extraction tools, which were 17.5. They are now going to no longer require those this year and try to go for next year with them. They can do away with it without a year. So this fiscal year, they're no longer going to ask for that. And then they still need the 75,000. Now the 75,000 is that ignition system that's going to be attached to the building there. That is a safety hazard that they, I believe for the last several fiscal years, they've been trying to ask for it.
So we
it's
can take
something-
that out of reserves.
So what we're going to do is that will be a capital item. If the interlocal agreement is the MUD pays for the capital assets of it. It's going to go on our books. So we removed it off of their budget and put it on our side of the budget. So visually, this is an offset number to offset the expense you're going to see later down the page, because we're going to pay for this through reserves in the fire side.
Okay, and then which reserve account is that coming out of?
It's actually coming out of the fire. So we have some extra funds in the fire, in our fire. We separate anything that comes in, whether it's taxes, whether it's any permits, whether it's mining, only hitting 90% of the expenses. Anything that's remaining stays in the fire fund, does not move at all.
Yeah, and I guess the only thing I want to make sure is that we weren't pulling it out of a reserve for a designated reserve, that
Correct.
this is just a general reserve.
This is a general reserve on the fire side. We're not
Okay.
pulling out of GASB. That's something that I highly disagree that we should do, because GASB is really set aside for what we classify as GASB reserve. It's set aside for the fire truck replacement, which will probably be in the ladder truck in 4 years or whatever everybody kind of agrees on. Also in the reserve right now, which makes, and if you go through the cash report later in the agenda here, there is some extra money in the fire side, but you have to also know that we still have to pay the true up to the town for the next 2 months. So the true up meaning, and I'll go down later in the slide, is yes, it's 50, a little over 50,000, almost 51,000 per month. That still has to come out this fiscal year. So that's another 101,000 that's going to come out basically, leaving about 313,000. Now some of these are funds that before the merger of for the interlocal agreement, some of these were funds that were left over before they got carried over. So there are a little bit of funds in the fire. The fire is obviously trying to completely balance out the budget from revenue and expenses, but sometimes, maybe a little bit of taxes difference, maybe we get some delinquency that comes in that we can't really budget delinquency because we don't know when they're actually going to pay. There are a few little things that can add a fund a little bit each year. So those are what we have in there. So we would be able to fund this out of the 75,000 out of the fire extra reserves that we have in there.
Did they explain why they could put off that other equipment? Because I thought at the time, the current equipment wasn't sufficient to have, for some vehicles and that stuff, the equipment wouldn't work. That the
Yeah, it's-
equipment was antiquated to the
Yeah,
point where
on
it
the
was
new
useless.
truck, the equipment is sufficient, but on the old truck,
Truck,
it's
it was
not. And so that's one of the questions I had as well,
I'm a
is
little
why
concerned about
that item was
citizen
being
safety by
sacrificed.
knocking that out.
Now, as far as my understanding with him, we've had several different meetings going back and forth. I believe Cartman was there. He did talk about how, I guess there's other towns who help in, you know, who have certain equipment that can help in for the rare cases that it can't be used, the equipment they can't use there. I know this is something he was trying to trim down. He came to me and said, this is something that I can do without another year. So I can bring that to him and ask him, you know, do we really need to go forward with that? You know, the only option, if we do go forward with that, the only option is we would have to pay for that out of reserves, and what's remaining reserves. Now, one of the things I do want to be cautious about is, you know, even though, you know, the cool thing about municipality, right, is even though we have funds, doesn't necessarily mean we have funds. So the next 3 months, when we start bringing in the new fiscal year and we start bringing in taxes, we're not going to see a lot of revenue coming in on the tax side from fire tax. So there's no, you know, for 3 months, we still have to pay that true-up that's in the interlocal agreement to the town, whether that be 56,000 or 60,000, whatever it comes out to when we do our true-up here, and we'll talk about it here in a minute. We still have to pay that even though we don't have revenue coming in. So that technically we dip into what we have in extra reserves. So if we deplete that, there's a possibility that our account goes negative.
Yeah, it's not really reserved, it's more of
Operating fund.
a operating fund.
It's an operating fund, correct? Or just left over
I'm
them.
just, as long as there's no compromise to citizen safety because of that, and I'm hoping that he kept that in mind when he said he could do without, so. I don't mind spending the money if it means keeping me safe or anybody else.
Mr. President, if I could just chime in here for a second. So I had a pretty lengthy discussion with the town manager on Friday, and you and I talked about this kind of, so Stephen's using the word true up to define the process defined in the interlocal agreement about, let's figure out how much the mud is supposed to transfer to the town, divided by 12, and then this is the true up. So we have a bucket that money flows into from taxes. It does not flow in at an equal rate per month. I mean, it comes in starting in December, finishes up around Marchish, kind of is that. And then, of course, we're dependent on last year's kind of property values. We make a projection of how much revenue is going to go in that bucket, and generally we've been conservative, so a little extra money is trickled into that bucket over what we projected, which is why there's actually some money there today. But what you don't want to do is get in a place where, you know, the first 3 months of the fiscal year, we take all of the remaining reserves out of that bucket, and it's negative, because we want to keep integrity about that. The flip side of this is that there is a vague reference in the interlocal agreement to either party, you know, being able to propose future changes to that agreement, like, you know, you can come back in a future year and change the methodology. One of the open questions we're all facing right now is, let's say that, you know, there's $90,000 in inspection fees going to come from PD 30, and let's say 15,000 of them come in this fiscal year. So what does that true up process look like at the end of the year? I guess I'm looking for a new terminology for the equalization rate at the start of the ILA, because we all have true ups that happen at the end of the fiscal year. And we'd have to figure out some way that, okay, so here's $15,000 in inspection revenue flows into the town's general fund. How does that end up showing up as a revenue for next year's fire budget? If that makes sense. I mean, we're enterprise fund driven, so for us, it flows in the bucket, then it's available for the next year. The town is more municipality driven, so they have like their big bucket, they have a reserve policy, and then whatever revenue they have coming in, they allocate to different departments. But we have this agreement that kind of talks about our square dance and what that's going to look like around the fire budget. So in my discussions with Tom, he said, yeah, if we're getting into the gray area, whether or not we're going to go negative in November, we can work with you, because ultimately we're just sending them a check every month for this equal amount of money. And if it means that we have to wait a month or, you know, double it up, he said, no, we think we can work with that. That's not a problem. It's what's called out in the ILA, but we can work around that. And then separately, I think Stephen and the town finance folks have said, look, let's just figure out how to do it this year. We don't know how often there's going to be extra money coming from inspections. And then propose whatever solution we come to as two staffs to the respective boards at the end of this fiscal year. So that's kind of where we're at. You know, I think the choice of dropping the extraction equipment was related to there are just certain types of cars that they have trouble cutting into now. They actually are a small percentage of the overall fleet. Over time, they might get bigger. Like how many Teslas do you have to cut into, right? I think some of it was carbon fiber composite type materials that those new tools will be needed for. So in an effort to help close the budget, the fire chief has said, well, we're gonna push that off 1 year and focus on the health and safety aspects of the air handling equipment, which we're on board with. Thank you, sir.
So go down the budget here. The next item is you're gonna see salaries, change a little bit. I can't tell you exactly what, this came back from them, what their projection, their salary is gonna be different here. And then you have where the medical insurance and dental insurance, a little bit changing there. Just going down here, really the next big change you see is the building maintenance. Once again, that's moving the 75,000 off of their budget to our side, which is gonna be capital expense and put on our books and paid for out of reserve. And then going on the next sheet here, you'll see small tools and equipment. That's where the 17.4, 17.5 was for the excavation tools. Those have been removed now. And then you'll see on the very bottom where it has highlighted there, that 75,000 going into our capital, which is gonna be the fire side, so it's in our budget. So going all the way down, the total projected decrease is about 22, almost 23,000 is what they kind of shaved off of their budget. And then obviously we're paying the 75,000 out of reserve on our side, and then plus the 90,000, so.
Tell me about the building maintenance again. Pulled 75,000 out of the building maintenance.
So we pulled the 75,000 off of their budget, and it's on our budget, because
Okay.
even as the interlocal agreement is, the MUD is supposed to be covering 100% of that, any capital assets.
And we
Okay.
pulled that out of reserve.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
And if you look at the 75,000 that's in the revenue side, that's just a plug number basically to offset the expenses that are gonna be on the expense side for the MUD, on the very bottom.
Just with a side note, we believe, and we've communicated that to the town staff, that a capital improvement to the building of the fire station belongs on our fixed asset list.
Yes.
And that's also reflected in this move from just
Okay.
building maintenance down to our capital line item,
Okay.
which is where it should be depreciated from
Okay.
our perspective.
Gotcha, thanks.
So if you go, when you hear me say true up, if you look in the very bottom of that second page, this is what we consider the true up. If you look in the agreement, we talked about true up in here, and true up, with the expenses or the revenue for the fire at the end of the year. This is our true up that we pay every single month. So if you look in the bottom here, $674,452 would need to go to the town throughout the year. We break it down, and it comes out to $56,204 per month to them that we transfer over every single month. Or we pay them a check every single month we transfer out into the fire side. So currently, right now, we're paying $50,700 and something right now, is what we pay them each month. So if you kind of look at the difference on what we're paying out.
Okay.
Any questions on that? All right.
I'm good.
Okay, so there's no action to be taken on 2A, 2B. Item number 3, consider and take appropriate action regarding tax rates for fiscal year 2018 tax year. A, approve proposed tax rate for 2018 tax year. And B, schedule, date, and authorize publication of notice for hearing regarding adoption of final tax rates for 2018 tax year.
So I guess I'll take this one too while we're at it. So if we will go into page 86, and we can look at the proposed tax rates for the fiscal year 2019. And I'll kind of walk you through here, what each thing means, and if there's any questions on it. I know we went over this a little bit in the last meeting, as far as what rates we had then. So all these numbers are certified. The very top section of it is going to be Tarrant County, Denton County, and then the PID, and then out of district and PID. These are all certified numbers for tax value. If you go down, we have the fire side. The 1.6 is what's needed for revenue requirement in the fire side. We do the calculations, and it comes out to basically seeing out what we're going to get for revenue and what the rate needs to be. So with the revenue there, that 1.1 is coming in from the MUD side, and then the 500,000 is for the PID assist. So you saw all the other on the budget. Anybody have any questions on that one? On the fire?
And that's coming in at the tax rate of .116, which is the rollback rate.
Correct. So yeah, if we want to go in with all these rates that I have here, if you want to go and look on the right side column, this kind of gives you an example of what we're looking at. So is your 2018 versus 2019 years. You have your O&M side, the general fund. This is our percentage of it, which is and then you have the fire side on below that.
Yeah, I was just making sure everyone was aware that we
Yes.
went up to the rollback rate.
So the rollback rate, the max rollback rate is 0.1166. Giving the rates that we have now with everything staying the same here, looks like our overall rate is going to be 0.1161. Do you see that one in pink where the rate is?
Yeah.
162,
A
yeah.
1162
Two,
if you round
yeah.
up.
If you round up,
Exactly.
correct, 1162.
So we're just below.
Since our finance manager picks and chooses when he rounds.
Sorry, let me go. 0.116179 as we have on there. But if we go in, we'll look at the paper publication that I have. Actually shows what is going to go out to the public, and they're going to see the 1162, which would be the next. It doesn't go down.
Before you leave that page, I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
On the left-hand side, the second pink block down has got $167,800 associated with the PID. Can you tell me what that's about?
Okay, so these are numbers. So the PID only pays for the legal and the auditor part of the non-departmental, Department 39. So that is just showing, it's a calculation for me, basically showing that we're paying the full non-departmental, which is a 184. The MUD is being charged that part. The PID's only being responsible for 167,000 of that.
Okay, over to the, slightly to the right and down, it says revenue from the MUD tax, 132,384. Revenue from PID surcharge, 51,930, for a total of 184,314.
Correct, which is the total price of the non-departmental.
Okay,
So if you look, and on the left-hand side here, so the MUD is, so the whole departmental that the MUD is responsible is 184,314. So it's not an even split between the two. So that's why you have two separate rates, one for the MUD and one for the PID part. Because they're not paying for the additional, they don't, like I said, they're only paying for the legal and the auditor part of the non-departmental. So the appraisal and the tax admin fees they're not responsible for.
yeah, but my point would be, if you look on the right side, it says revenue from PID surcharged, 51,930, legal and auditor only in Department 39 budget.
Correct?
To the left, it says 16780. Wouldn't that be 51,930? I mean, wouldn't those numbers be, it says required revenue O&M.
It's because I'm using the 167 as calculation. If you go back into look at the Denton County for the tax evaluation up there, I have to use the 169,800, which is backing out of the tax appraisal and the tax admin fees. I have to back that out to get my percentage. And then I can use that percentage to multiply to the tax valuation to give me the total amount, which is the 51,930 they're going to pay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So what
okay, so this is just a, it's a worksheet number.
It's a plug number that I'm using for formulas to calculate the percentages going forward.
Yeah,
Got it.
it's not the actual revenue you bring
Got
in.
it,
Correct.
got it, thank
Yeah,
you.
so the overall that we need to collect on there is 184,314. So I'm using that to determine the calculation percentage that it needs to be for the MUD.
Well, the
or for
fact that it was under a block that said required revenue.
Oh yeah.
And I went
guess can
back and
hide the
looked,
PID
I
part,
went
but
back in previous years and looked at it and didn't find that, and so it became a question mark.
There was an issue in previous years where originally when we put out a budget, it was originally put out that that it wasn't backed out to the MUD side. We had to go in after the fact before we billed the PID surcharge and changed it. So
Okay.
it was different than what the actual approved budget was because the percentage wasn't there. So I did this to actually show what the PID is charging. And I guess I can title it a little bit different or try to reclassify, maybe hide it from everything else.
Oh, we don't want to hide it.
Yeah, well, it's like, it was like, okay, somebody was looking.
Any other question? Anything on the INS side? No. All right. Are we going on to the next side and going to the tax hearing? Public hearing?
Waiting on you.
All right, so going to public hearing, this is something that has to go out. I've already spoken with Star Telegram for the Keller Citizen. We have, I think it's technically 14 days, but we're gonna give more time. As soon as this is approved, when it were proposed, we're gonna go ahead and submit this out to the paper for the running in the paper. It will be ran on Wednesday, the 29th, giving the citizens enough time to review it, understand it, and know that we have a tax hearing, public tax rate hearing on the next meeting on the September 17th on Monday. This has been updated on my, as you look on this, on your slides here, it says Tuesday, but I handed out a new one, said Monday. Put the right date, but the wrong day on there. So going through is we have the tax rate. Here is last year's adopted tax rate versus this year's proposed tax rate. And then here is kind of giving you the value difference of the rates, so it gives you a percentage increase and what the appraisals were last year on the average versus the average of this year. Any questions so far on these?
And this is a maximum tax rate. We may come in
Maximum
at
tax
this or lower, but this would lock what we do.
Not to exceed.
Not to exceed.
Correct, not to exceed this amount, based on everything we have here and everything that's shown on the fire side. Now, if anything was to say that we had to change how the fire side was covered on there, then I'll have to obviously recalculate the rate and go from there, but being conscious of the rollback rate, this is kind of how we projected to get there based on everything we have here.
I have two questions.
Sure.
First, does this require because I can remember last year, some things required a roll call vote. And the other thing is there specific verbiage that the motion is required within the motion.
It does require a roll call. I'm not sure about the verbiage part.
Yeah, now, for other types of taxing units, there are requirements about the motion. For MUDs, there is not. The newspaper notice form that must be published specifies the individual officers who voted for or against the proposed tax, so it is necessary that we record each individual's vote.
Okay.
But the form of the motion itself is applicable to other types of taxing units, not MUDs.
Okay.
Anything else?
That's everything I have. I'll turn it over to you.
We'll entertain a motion.
I move to direct staff to put out the Water District notice of public hearing on tax rate to occur on Tuesday, September 17th, 2018, at 6:30 p.m. at the SWOR Municipal Building. And also that the,
That's wrong, because his date is wrong. It's
oh, I'm sorry,
the
Monday.
7th, yeah.
I did send the updated one.
You
Yeah, I
did,
did put the
yeah,
wrong.
and I went and looked at what I got in paper, so I'll start the motion over. I move that the staff is directed to advertise and that the MUD will have a Water District notice of public hearing on the tax rate to occur on Monday, September 17th, 2018 at 6:30 p.m. at the SWOR Municipal Building, 100 Municipal Drive, Trophy Club, Texas. And that the
Sorry.
maximum proposed rate would be .116118 per $100 of valuation.
You mean 618, not 6118.
11618.
I thought you said 6118.
I did. Correct it to .11618 per $100 of valuation.
Okay, we have a motion to direct staff to hold a public hearing on the proposed tax rate for fiscal year 2019 on Monday, September 17th at 6:30 at the Savoy Municipal Building, 100 Municipal Drive and Trophy Club, for a not-to-exceed rate of .11618. Do I have a second?
Second.
Oops. Proposed by Vice President Rose, seconded by Secretary Treasurer Flynn. Any discussion? All in favor?
Roll call.
Okay, I was gonna do it. No. If everyone votes and then you call out specifically who voted for it, isn't that the equivalent as doing a roll call, or do you have to say?
We
this
will make
person-
sure the minutes reflect how everyone voted. If that's not clear, Lori or I will point that out.
Okay, everyone in favor indicate by raising your right hand or raising your hand. Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Vice President Rose, Secretary Treasurer Flynn, Director Chapman, and Director Castaway, and President Wilson all vote in favor. None opposed. Motion passes.
Well done. Works.
Okay. Number 4, consider and take appropriate action to approve staff recommendation for pay ranges and job classifications.
Mr. President, let me try to make this as abbreviated as we can in terms of an option. This was presented to the board in terms of a set of recommendations that would come forward at a future date back at our special budget meeting. I want to say that was in July, but the date is eluding me. I also anticipated that we would need some recommendations to talk about implementation of these pay ranges. However, on reconsideration of the existing personnel manual, which your general manager agrees needs some editing and modification, I believe all of the tools necessary for administration of compensation, from cost of living increases and merit increases to making propose new job positions and trying to get a compensation recommendation associated with them. All of those things are provided for in the current personnel policy. So what I guess we're looking for today is just an adoption of the job classifications, the ranges. So there's 8 of them in your board packet, as well as the positions that are assigned to individual pay ranges. This would come back to the board really in between years where we go out for a classification and compensation study. So for example, if the cost of living increase went up 3%, we would move the ranges up 3% on all the positions, apply the 3% cost of living increase to the salaries. Merits are treated separately. In a year where we go out and have a complete review of the classifications, we would then bring back a set of new pay ranges for board consideration. But the tools for in-between full study years are already provided for in the personnel manual. So all we're really looking for is for our board to approve the staff recommendations for the job classifications and the jobs that are assigned to each of them. Let me also say that my battery just died, so I do not have the document in front of me.
So I would say just
Slide
for your-
88, I
for
think.
your benefit, or just my view, this is really a management issue. It's not per se a board issue. The only reason why this would really come before the board is obviously if you felt a desire to have us see it and approve it, or if the amount exceeded the general manager's allowance and to approve, but this is not necessarily a board issue. So I appreciate your openness and candor in bringing before us, but just know this is not a board issue, this is a management issue. Okay.
You want to talk about it, or?
Well, if you have discussion, feel free.
Well, I went charging through this and did a little bit of research, and I can't say that I'm totally pleased with the results of the study. Let me not say results. I'm not totally pleased with the study. And the reason being, there were some not applicables in here. For example, General Manager, City of Alvarado said no match. Ken Pfeiffer's your city administrator. That's a match. I went through and found several instances of that. So I would, if you ever communicate back with these folks, I think I would request a little bit more diligence in their efforts, would kind of be the way I would put it. The other thing I have is what we have here, what you'd given us, says adjusted. It says data is adjusted based on geographic differences in cost of labor and effective date of published data. I don't know exactly, you know, what type of adjustments were made. And so there would be I would have a question on that. The other thing that I noted is they also put out, basically 7 months later, 6 or 7 months later after this set of data, a compensation survey results to the other cities, which has the pay ranges in it. Those pay ranges differ from our adjusted data. And the other thing about it that I noticed is that we have a wastewater plant superintendent line here that was not in the study, in the information that they sent out to the other cities who were involved. And when you go into the superintendent, what's called superintendent here, we're talking about wastewater, and the only wastewater matches that were on the study were 2 from American Water Works Association large. So I would say, you know, can you tell me where the numbers came from?
Sure. So let's just talk a little bit about methodology here.
Okay.
So the basic process is we put together job descriptions. In our case, we had to write some because
Yeah.
we did not have them for those positions. We select a set of comparable cities, and there was a little bit of board input on that process. The consultant takes those job descriptions and forms them into a survey,
Okay.
and the survey gets sent out to our benchmarking partners. That survey comes back with some information. What is in that information? Well, let's say it was the city of Grapevine, and they said, okay, here's the job description Trophy Club Municipal Utility District is sending us. We don't think we have one that's comparable to this job, and they send it back. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't have one.
They
but-
just didn't play.
But it, you know, to some extent, we're not telling them which of their positions to put into our survey.
Got it.
So we're not driving that aspect of it. Then we get to actually opine a little bit as staff. So Stephen and I were the project managers on this. We worked together to try to get, you know, fair comparables as best we could. And again, I reported to the board previously, we don't feel like we got good comparables on some of these positions. And that's a given, I'll grant
Yeah.
that. But it came back, and we, you know, in some cases, for example, I wanna say that might have been, I wanna say it was the finance director for Denton. Stephen and I looked at that, and we actually backed that out. We said, you know, that's a you know, a huge city. It's got a really high salary number. If you left that one in, the average, your financial manager would be making more than your GM. And that may be appropriate, actually, but, you know, we tried to work to be reasonable in our comparables in that process. It is actually really difficult to compare apples and apples when you look at the differences in scale, and then you look at the number of hats that we wear. Today, we were actually interviewing for that wastewater superintendent role, and one of the gentlemen that we interviewed came from a big organization where he had a very tightly defined job running a wastewater plant. Did he have any experience in, you know, the maintenance side? No. He was specialized in operations. How about compliance? No. I'm not really understanding of that. Whereas, you know, we might have to have somebody that wears multiple hats just because we're so small.
Broader job description.
So that is in fact the kind of nature of a salary/benchmarking survey. They're not perfect, and you will see in there that at least the staff is making a recommendation on one position that it not be placed anywhere near what the other ones were, based on our opinion of the value that that role brings to the district, and it ought to be in a higher pay range. I do believe that this ought to be done every 3 to 5 years. We can always find other consultants to do this work, although Siegel Waters is well known in the industry. In fact, when you go back to that superintendent position, we saw kind of weird anomalies in that assistant superintendent positions, our survey partners gave a higher position than the actual superintendent. So we kind of went through that with them and said, no, this doesn't seem right to us. Let's go back and look at them. We reposition things, and we think we're in a good place, even though the comparables didn't make sense. I mean, and so there are elements of that that come into it. We want to make sure everybody who is here feels that they're fairly compensated. that may be a goal that's never achievable. But, from your general manager on down. But, so be it. We do think that the board ought to go out for this every 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
And within the personnel policy, I have the authority to say, we're gonna create a new position. And I need to go ask them to do just a single position review and give us a salary range. So that's why it didn't come back with a bunch of other administration recommends. I think I have that authority already.
Okay. I do have one question on the utility field worker.
Yes, sir.
The maximum here is below the maximum that we currently are at, even after we go to the new pay scale. And so I was wondering if we have anybody in that situation right now, if I can find a utility field worker.
Let me say, as a general rule, as we looked at these ranges, we were surprised to find that whether by intent or happenstance, we're actually not far off of having people fairly compensated
Okay.
with
Yeah.
respect to these ranges, even if you don't agree with these ranges.
No, the utility, this one shows a current range at utility field worker at the top scale of 56,000. Under the new pay scale, it would be 49.5. That's the one that,
Yeah, I don't know that I can speak specifically to
Okay.
that one at this point in time. I do know that with respect to utility field workers, there is a special piece of our compensation approach that involves, if you come to work for me, Bill, and you get an operator's license for the wastewater side, we're gonna give you a pay bump to reflect that. So we have some tools within that pay range to get people to the upper end that we don't have in other job classifications.
but I wanted to make sure that by passing this, I didn't take somebody out there and say, oh, by the way, you're getting this, thanks to doing this, you're getting a
Yeah.
$7,000 pay cut per year.
No, nobody is getting a pay cut as a result of these classifications.
Okay,
The-
thank you.
The one thing I would say is, I think on the water and wastewater side, the job descriptions and really focusing on the verticals, i.e. water, wastewater, are appropriate. I think when you have jobs outside of that, I don't think we ought to limit ourselves to water, wastewater, simply because if you're performing a function, many of those functions may be the equivalent to a town function or some other function, like a school district. For example, project manager. If you're a good project manager, if you're doing it in wastewater, if you're doing it in finance, if you're doing it in construction, a good project manager, good project manager. So I don't think we ought to limit it within those verticals for those fields that aren't directly related to those verticals. Obviously, water needs to be compared to water, wastewater compared to wastewater, but others, I don't think they ought to be tied to that standard.
We run into the situation, I'll give you a clear example. We looked at benchmark organizations that had water and wastewater operators. The town of Trophy Club is not one of those. So we did not benchmark against the town of Trophy Club, although arguably some of our roles would be very comparable. So, going to the next time around, 3 to 5 years, when we go back to revisit this, I think those are adequate considerations for us to say, hey, maybe we need to pick 3 or 4 comparables that make sense for water and wastewater operators, people that run backhoes and vector trucks. But we have finance managers, we have other folks, people that edit websites, those kind of things, that probably need to have a broader field of consideration to get adequate benchmarks.
Okay, so if I understood previous discussion, based on the current policy manual, you have the authority to do this.
I believe so.
Thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion. He wanted to get us to approve it. He doesn't have to have it that way, but that was his request.
Our council suggested I bring it forward for approval. I think acceptance probably fits in the same category.
Yeah.
Many entities I work with the board, and there's a legal requirement, but adopt this to provide kind of parameters, and then the GM implements it under his
Okay.
personnel policies.
I move to approve the classification and compensation recommendations 8.20.2018 as as put forth by the general manager.
You have to show me where you're reading from.
Right here.
He made it up from my file title.
Yeah, I took it from his file title.
I don't have his file title.
Oh, jeez, what am I gonna do here? And by-
Perhaps the motion could just be to approve the classification and compensation recommended.
As presented at the
presented by
dais.
general manager.
Yeah.
Okay,
Is that what you meant?
that's what I meant to say. If the secretary caught that. I move to approve the classification compensation recommendations as put forward by the general manager.
We have a motion by Vice President Rose to approve the recommendation for pay range and job classification as presented by the general manager at the dais.
I'll second.
We have a second by Director Castaway. Any other comments? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, item number 5, consider and take appropriate action regarding approval of change order 16 from Weber Cadagua Partners in the amount of $1,997 for wastewater treatment plant improvements.
Mr. President, we've just recently changed our change order approval policy, but ultimately, this project is over budget, and in fact, there is no contingency budget left, and the staff is left with a previous board's recommendation that all change orders come forward on this project to the board. This is a small one. The staff approves it, and we recommend approval. We would telegraph that there are probably a few extra small ones coming forward as we close out the project.
I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve change order number 16 from Weber Cadagua Partners in the amount of $1997 for wastewater treatment improvements.
We have a motion to approve change order 16 from Weber Cadagua Partners in an amount not to exceed $1,997 for wastewater treatment plant improvements. Do I have a second?
I second.
Motion was seconded by Director Chapman. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Consider and take appropriate action regarding, relating to district rebranding. Vice President Rose, Director Castaway. Castaway.
There was,
He is just
Pass
on a roll
away.
tonight, isn't he?
there was a promise to get out of here at 8 o'clock this evening. Doesn't look like we're gonna make it, so I'm gonna make this one brief. We went forward with, open the logo submissions up, and we had one logo submission made by, I believe, Mr. Ramirez. And that is B on page 109. There was some concern expressed by a few folks that they might want to do rebranding. They might not want to go forward with rebranding, or they might like to keep the current logo. So we put the current logo in as A, and if they want to keep the current logo, or if you want to keep the current logo, or you don't want to rebrand, then I would say select A. So what I've done now is developed a sheet with all of them on, and give people the option to pick their first, second, third, fourth, and fifth choice. And I am going to make a motion that we put this sheet out for voting of the directors, staff, and employees, and that we close the balloting on Friday, September the 7th.
Before you do that, I made a request last meeting to get a cost of the rebranding. Stephen, have you had the opportunity to give us some idea if we went forward with the rebranding, how much this would cost?
Right now, as Carmen and I have looked at it, I mean, we just have the swag number that we have presenting our budget right now for the rebranding side. I can pull that up here. But we do not have a definite cost on there.
Again, my computer's dead, and I think his use of the word swag is exactly right. We looked back a few years to when the previous brand was created and how much was budgeted for that. It's my understanding that the artwork was relatively donated. It was the cost of other things such as logos on shirts, logos on trucks, those types of things. And we basically pulled budget info from that previous event 2 to 5 years ago. I wasn't here, so I forget. It's not that far ago that we created this brand. So we just stuck that number in and said, we're good.
Is it indexed for inflation?
No. At least I don't believe so. We might have rounded up.
So we have 20,000 is what we have as a number put out there.
I'm just curious, how long have we had the current logo?
Lori and Mike might be the best.
I remember
How long,
cabinet
maybe?
looking at when.
2013, I was gonna say about 5 years.
Okay.
And I
So-
just also wanna add, when I'm over budget for my uniforms next year, it's because I didn't get to order them this year.
So Bill, are we making a motion? What, are you
Well, I
proposing
had
a
it-
motion, or are we having discussion about the whole subject?
I made a motion, and the president interrupted my motion before a determination could be made on a second.
Well, I have discussion, so I don't know if it's now, if you want to make the motion and then discuss, we can do that.
The more the merrier, I say. Go on. Guess if we get the discussion out the way now, then we, well,
Your motion, correct?
I didn't get, you have a motion, but I didn't get a second. I was interrupted.
so would you like to finish it?
The motion was complete. I needed a second.
Anyone would like to second? Well, Vice President Rose made a motion to take the sheet in packet page 109 and allow the directors, employees,
Staff.
aren't they employees as well? Okay. The directors and staff
I
to,
get to vote twice.
No, they already have us outvoted, so.
pick a item and apparently rank 1 through 5, your top 5 choices. And then he was going to set a deadline, but I don't recall,
September the 7th, Friday, September the 7th.
with the deadline of September 7th. Do I have a second on that motion?
I'll second it.
It's seconded by Director Chapman. Are there any discussions?
There is. I'm struggling with this one. I really am. It's not that I'm opposed necessarily to the concept of a new logo, but we sent out the survey of the staff, right? And then the survey of the public, which was posted. Our grand total response was 1 person, and they didn't like it. They basically said, "Why are we spending money?" That's the public person. That's the outside.
Yeah, we got one.
One person did it and opposed it. The staff, I'm going from memory here, but the staff, I think we had 5 or 6 people, at least 3, if you have the numbers there. 3 people. I think we had one other additional idea, maybe that's that second one. But 2 or 3 people said, "Why are we doing this?" I don't know why we're doing this, guys. I mean, we're spending 20 grand that we don't have really. And we're not getting too much support from our constituency. So that's my issue. I'm not supportive of.
I agree with that too, and when the employees said that they didn't want the water drop, they're the ones that have to wear these uniforms, you know, so I totally get that.
Yeah, this is one for me as well. In the big scheme of things, of all the problems the district has, this is probably not one of them.
I did receive a phone call from the original person who made the logo, because I had a website issue, and he still loves our logo. He wanted me to tell everybody that he was really appreciative of being involved in that process long ago. And if we needed any help with anything in the future, he would to contact him.
The purpose of the rebranding was because the current brand does not represent the mud in any way.
Well,
It
that's an
represents the mud.
that's an
yeah.
opinion, Bill.
It represents the mud. It may not be a pictorial representation of the mud, but neither would simply just a light blue raindrop, because 40% or 35% of our revenue is not light blue, regardless of how clean Carmen says it is.
But we turn it into light blue.
I've been
That's
out
our
there.
job.
I went out there and it wasn't light blue.
You go down to the end of the process, it's clear. It's not light blue, it's clear. And the job is clean water. Clean water coming in, keeping it clean, making it clean, filtering stuff out, and clean out the other end. So, the purpose of the logo was to represent what we do, something a little bit more upbeat, and that was the reason for the effort.
Understood. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. So if the motion passes, then we'll proceed to send it out and let people vote on it. If the motion fails, then we take no action on this item. Any other questions or comments? Everyone understand what we're doing here? Okay. Does anyone need me to read the motion over again?
No.
Okay. All in favor indicate by raising your hand. Vice President Rose?
On the island.
Shipwrecked on the island. All opposed indicate by raising your hand. Motion fails 4-1. Okay, number 7, consider and take appropriate action regarding banking and depository matters. A, adopt resolution 2018-0820A, authorize extension of depository pledge agreement with Prosperity Bank. B, adopt resolution 2018-0820B, approving depository agreement with the Bank of the West. Staff.
I think the primary person to talk about this just stepped out of the room. But it's okay. We have, maybe Tony can chime in here.
Stephen has entered the building.
Well, while we're waiting for him to approach, let me just say I did not participate in either voting on the previous said logos or trying to create a new one, because I personally have nearly zero artistic talent, much better with a calculator. So I stayed out of that previous discussion for what it's worth. Stephen, tell us about number 7.
Item number 7.
All right. Let me get to item 7. Sorry, I had to use the restroom there.
I can get us going if you like. So the district has 2 depository agreements, one with Prosperity Bank, and the other with
Bank of the West.
Bank of the West. One of those expires, the other has an initial term, but it can be extended for an additional 2-year term. So the resolutions before you, one would exercise that option to extend the Prosperity Bank term for an additional 2 years. And the second resolution is intended to approve a new depository agreement with Bank of the West.
Correct. So Prosperity does expire at the end of September with the option for the 2 years, as Tony just stated there. So this is to continue on with the 2 years. I reached out to Prosperity Bank to make sure there would be no changes in fees or anything else as we move forward and extend it for another 2 years. There will be no changes in any fees, but they will increase our APY slightly. So that's our percentage of yield, annual percentage yield. It will increase with the next 2 years. So we will get a little bit more on interest assist in the bank.
From what to what?
It's going to go, right now we're getting 0.35 right now for the bank now, and then 0.40 for the money market. That will increase to 0.50, so we'll grab another 15 basis points there. And then the other one's actually going to go to 0.85.
Is
So
that reflected in the budget?
It is not. This hasn't been agreed upon yet, so I have to, interest is a little harder to reflect on, especially when it comes to reserves. So that's gonna be the Prosperity side here. We moved from First Financial, just before my time, and it was due to what Prosperity can do online. We do a lot of online banking, when it comes to trying to set up transfers, wires, stuff like that, ACHs. And then when it comes to the fees, and Prosperity was able to, accommodate what we needed. Since I've been here, I've been happy with Prosperity. I'm in good relationship with the, bank manager there. Anytime we need documents, anytime we need anything, they're there for us. So, my recommendation as a staff is to continue on and do a 2-year extension with it.
Okay. Any other comments? I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve Resolution 2018-0820A, authorizing extension of depository pledge agreement with Prosperity Bank.
Would you like to combine them together?
We should probably separate, 'cause that'll be more topic when it comes to the next one, I would say.
No.
Okay. We have a motion to adopt Resolution 2018-0820A, authorizing extension of depository pledge agreement with Prosperity Bank. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion by Vice President Rose, a second by Secretary Treasurer Flynn. Any discussion? Hearing none, indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously. B.
All right, B is going to do with Bank of the West. We have gone through a 5-year tenure with them already. We have the option to continue on with Bank of the West. I received their rates. And I reached out to a few other banks out there to see what some other rates, competitive rates are, and they were actually on the lower side from where we're around. So we have the option, and it's going to really come down to the investment policy as it gets rewritten and which direction the board would like to go. Is do we want to diversify our depository banks or not? We have the option to, take the money that's in savings. So right now with Bank of the West, what we've used it for is kind of a separate savings account that's kind of sitting on the side. We have done a couple CDs with them before too. We have the option to continue on with Bank of the West, keep the money in there. The money's been sitting in there. We haven't really touched in the last 3 years. That's been sitting in there besides accruing interest. We can take that money and move it over to our main bank in Prosperity, which is giving a higher APY, or we can move it over to TexPool, which is even giving us a higher yield from there, and keep it in the pool account. As far as our investment policy that we currently have right now, the policy is we do want to diversify, not put all of our funds in one account, naturally. Right now, we have set aside, I believe it's about 90% is a maximum we can do in TexPool. We're well okay with that, so we can move that money into the TexPool account and be fine and be under investment policy guidelines. But it really depends on the direction the board would like to go. Do we want to diversify? Do we want to have a secondary depository bank for CDs? Prosperity does have better rates.
What
across
are the
board.
rates for between Bank of the West and whatever else?
TexPool.
Okay, so Prosperity, right now, like I said before, we have 0.50 and 0.85. Bank of the West is 0.25 right now. So there's a significant difference on there.
25 to.
Another bank I went to is 0.30. So, they're a little bit higher than Bank of the West, but still fairly higher than Prosperity. And TexPool is 1.9 right now. Obviously we can pull the money in pool. You don't want to put all your funds into a pool. Obviously, it has to do with security reasons on there. But we do have some room based on our investment policy to move more money in there if we want to.
How much is in that account? Is that the 568,000
That
roughly?
is 700 and, I have the number, 730 something right now. Or 745, I believe is what it is, 745,000. But it was at one time we had about $1.5 million sitting in there, and we had some stuff in CDs. We pulled it, and pretty much it's been sitting at 700, just accruing interest as time went by. So we don't really do too much with the bank for the depository reasons.
One final question,
Yeah.
Secretary. What percentage of our funds are currently in TexPool right now?
It's roughly about 70 some odd % now. A lot of that's going to be for projects and stuff that are sitting in there because we can't use them. But I believe there's about 70% in there. I can give you the final official number if you want to do this calculation there, but roughly.
I mean, ultimately, at 1.9 on 700,000, that's roughly 14 grand versus at
0.25 was the low, right?
0.25,
Correct.
which is about 300, about 3,000. So it's about 11 grand a year difference in real money.
And to me, it's not the raw number, 'cause it's not that much money, but percentage-wise, it's a big number.
It's a big
I mean,
number. It's
for an
significant.
existing customer, which we are,
It's a 600%
yeah, I
increase in interest.
kind of take this as a, take it or leave it, slap in the face from Bank of the West.
Well, and we don't do a lot with Bank of the West, and like I said, we've done a few CDs
We
with
could
them.
do less.
We could do less. We do have a security box that's associated with them also, that we've had for several years now since we created this. The other option, if we didn't want to put everything in pools due to diversification, is, even Prosperity, our bank that we use primarily as a depository, is yielding higher rates too, so we could always move it into there.
That's the
And-
0.85, right?
Correct. And that's with the money market. So depending on which one you want to do, we have the savings and we have the money market in there. We can alter and change, or if we want to look at investment in the future and not have full liquidity, we have the option too to do CDs, which are yielding, I think, 1.9, 1.8, depending on the years and the amounts and everything, for Prosperity also. So if we want to go routes like that.
Have we gone back to Bank of the West with, kind of is that your best offer? I mean, knowing that we've got pretty significant,
So as most banks are, their rates, I think, are only good for about 2 weeks. This rate came in this last week. They then come back to us as I guess any bank would be, is if our rates are beat or anything, you can come back to them. We'll try to see what we can do to work them out. But they all kind of say the same thing. So you got to have a starting point somewhere to go with them. Obviously, Prosperity. We bank at all three of these, and we have funds in all of them. But heavily use Prosperity, and I feel the connection of Prosperity has been fairly good. Like I said, I just wanted to get some more rates out there to compare, and that's kind of where we are now.
Is TextPool covered by FDIC or SIPC?
FDIC,
No,
yeah, we're wrong.
no, but
There's
it's an
security.
extremely, but by definition.
It's not covered by either.
No,
Okay.
but it's specifically created to ensure there is no loss of principal.
So I mean, with all the other banks right now, they're all covered at 102% for security pledges.
For those which do have, those
Correct.
where the collateralization does apply. But TextPool is kind of a different entity by definition.
Okay.
Good.
You got it. Mr. Carmen?
Just one comment. So Stephen touched on this briefly. There's apparently a bank deposit box there that nobody in the room has ever looked in. So we don't know what's in it.
Yeah, I was about to ask.
And we're not totally sure where the key to it is. But if we decide to switch away from Bank of the West, we'll have to sort that piece out.
I'd suggest checking it before you do it.
Stephen tells me that one of the board members and myself have to go to get into that. I think that's the way it works.
There's two people in it, correct? I believe everybody on the board here is Carmen. I believe Lori is, if I'm not mistaken.
So maybe Lori and I could go and try to sort out, but at least nobody currently on staff knows what's in it, maybe nothing at the end of the day. And then separately, relative to the Bank of the West rates, were you quoting CD rates that had a period that you had to like buy into?
No,
Or was
these-
that just their average savings rate?
I quoted the money market rates, which basically our savings are a money market account. Right now, it's in the money market is what it is.
So that's
what I was quoting.
completely liquid, right? You could.
Correct.
But if we were to invest in a CD, you might get a higher rate.
Correct.
It's just you're not liquid for that period of time.
But I
So-
compared the CDs, that's one thing you have to look into. If you do want to do CDs in a depository bank, I compare Prosperity, who we bank with now, as our main depository bank versus Bank of the West. We are getting a better rate overall across the board with Prosperity. So if we want to go that direction, and if we wanted to lock anything in for a couple of years for a CD, we have that option with them.
Okay,
this
I'll
expire?
entertain a motion.
Yeah, so and the expiration date is actually a day before our meeting. I believe it's on the 16th is the expiration date
Of next month?
of next month, correct.
I'll make a motion, we'll see if I get a second. I move to approve Resolution 2018-0820B, approving depository agreement with Bank of the West.
We have a motion to adopt Resolution 2018-0820B approving the depository agreement with Bank of the West. Do we have a second? Going once, going twice. Divide on divide. Do we have alternative motion? I'll make a motion that we take the funds that are currently in the Bank of the West and transfer those funds into the tax pool account. Do I have a second?
I'll second that one.
We have a motion by President Wilson, seconded by Director Chapman. Any discussion?
If there is a need for a depository box, can you get that from TextPool?
No. I don't know. We've never asked, but I doubt it.
How about Prosperity?
Prosperity, they will have one, yes. Now, I don't know the fee comparison, but I believe we're paying,
Do you think it's more than $11,000 a year?
it's like $35 annually.
$35 annually?
Yeah.
I think we'll have a little extra to cover that. Any other discussion? Hearing none? All in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion passed unanimously. Okay, item number 8. Consider and take appropriate action to adopt order number 2018-0820, approving public presentations policy. Vice President Rose, Secretary Treasurer Flynn. You guys may begin.
Okay, what you have before you is the rework of the public presentation policy after it was before the board before, then went to the attorney and did some rework on it. That's a long story short. I'm going to move to approve order number 2018-0820A, approving a public presentation policy.
We have a motion by Director Rose to approve order number 2018-0820A, approving the public presentation policy. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Secretary Treasurer Flynn. I have a concern with the policy. On page on section, all right, I can stop getting it to move here. Section 2, second bullet. This removes this authorizes citizens to speak with or without prior notice for 6 minutes, without any direction from the board to be able to prevent that from occurring. I have an issue with that because you could have a item come up and have 50 people come up and talk for 6 minutes apiece, and that's 300 minutes or 5 hours, and they could literally shut down the meeting and we not accomplish anything. So I have an issue with having where you take complete control away from the board as it relates to public comments. I'm obviously for public comments. I think it's very important that we hear what the public has to say as it relates to matters that are covered by the board, but I don't think it can be open-ended and without any restrictions by the board.
So do you have a proposal on the time limit? You want to revise it
Well,
or no?
I would like to, I didn't per se have a problem with the way the verbiage was previously written. I think I'll let Vice President Rose express his concern with the verbiage as previously stated.
If in section 2.2, right after that it says time limits may be adjusted by the presiding officer. I think from my experience, having seen probably the most contentious issue in this town and was sitting at the dais for it, PD 30, at the meeting at the high school, where people were standing all the way at the back, chairs from front to back. And that meeting went from, I think, about 6:30 to 2 o'clock in the morning, something like that. What we did is everyone had the opportunity to speak. That stated we encourage people to, rather than repeat what other folks had said, if they agreed with them, they could come up, give their name and address, and say, I agree with the previous speaker. And so by using what I would call good skills, you avoid the situation where you have a room full of people and say, well, I'm only going to let you speak for a minute and a half and alienate half the room, or say I'm only going to take presentations for 30 minutes and upset everyone else. So there's a way, I think, to handle a group, and I think this policy allows you to do it.
Yeah, and I guess I would say I'm more of an advocate of managing for the norm and not the exception. And I mean, you've been here longer than I have, but in the 6 years that I've been in and around this, this is probably par for the course normally. There's one other gentleman that joins the gentleman that's currently out there. But it's typically not an issue. I don't think that you design policy based on an aberration. And I think that's exactly what this policy is doing. You're planning for the extreme rather than the norm.
Well, this is a pretty much a verbatim copy of what the town has. And it's
Yeah, I was
been
gonna ask you,
operating-
Bill, I thought the town was 4 minutes. I didn't think it was 6.
It's 4 for the citizens' presentation, it's 6 within an item that's agended.
I think it was probably written by the same person, which may explain why it's the same.
I don't think so. I went and copied it.
It's also quite a bit easier to read this if you go to the non-red line drawing.
Yeah.
To see what it really means, because that red line drawing gets.
It's
page
right, it's
120.
next,
Yeah,
it's
got
the
it.
next
I
one.
got you, yeah.
Just keep going forward.
Yeah.
It's easier to read.
The president's authority is perverted,
Perverted. Come on.
no, perverted, that would be good, is preserved, I mean, in the second sentence.
I'm
You
not
get shorter.
following your comment, Greg, on that we're managing to the exception.
Well, the exception was, he was saying that he talked about when you had everyone coming in to speak for PD 30.
Right.
Well, that's the exception.
Right.
If you look at what's normal and typical for not only the MUD, oftentimes the town, but I'll simply leave it to the MUD. That's rarely the exception.
We
But
don't-
Normally, you don't have-
aren't we saying here that we are managing to the norm, are we not?
No, this is designed to make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to speak. And what I'm saying is, rarely is there anyone here to speak. And so that's what I mean when I say we're managing to the exception. And which, again, I'm absolutely all for allowing people who feel passionate about a particular topic to come in and share their thoughts and views with the board. The only issue or concern I have is taking away all discretion by the board to put some limits on that.
Well, reading it without all the redlining, it does appear to me that the presiding officer yourself has that ability. It's built into it. It's not right up in the front, but like the second or third sentence in says that you can adjust it.
I can adjust the time, but for example, the presiding officer can adjust the time. And the directions that he gave in the example I have for PD 30, according to this, technically, the presiding officer wouldn't be able to give those directions because they could speak as long as they wanted to, and, well, they could speak up to their 6 minutes, and you couldn't stop it.
Well, 4 minutes.
Well, 6, because it's 4, then 2. You can speak 4, and then once the motion, then prior to the motion, you can speak for another 2 minutes. So you could have everyone speak for 4 minutes, and then right before the motion, get up and start over again and speak for another 2 minutes.
Yes, but the way this is written, the president would have the authority to adjust those times.
Yes, you can adjust the time, but I'm talking about adjusting the method in which people speak. So for example, to say, hey, if you agree, if you're gonna get up and say if there's 50 people and they're all planning on repeating the same thing, you can give direction and say, hey, why don't you do it this way, versus
Yeah.
Just having people get up and repeat, yeah,
You can do that.
yeah. Well,
You can do that with that.
In my mind, one of the key issues here is the question of whether citizen comments should be conducted during the citizen comment period, and whether or not your presiding officer has the discretion to decide whether to otherwise allow citizen comment outside that period. The red line changes would have given that discretion to your presiding officer so he could decide whether all citizen comment would be during citizen comments or otherwise in connection with each agenda item. And so with the changes, I think the policy enshrines that that comments will be allowed outside citizen comments during each individual item, and then the presiding officer would have the authority to change time limits in connection with that. In my mind, the real heart of the issue is whether or not your presiding officer will have the authority to allow citizen comments outside citizen comments portion of the meeting.
now, the way this is done, technically, couldn't a person get up and speak for 4 minutes doing citizens' comments and then come back and speak again on this particular issue? And then right before the motion, speak another 2 minutes?
Generally, I think the way that generally works is if somebody wants to speak on it, generally you want to tie the items with an agenda. If a citizen wants to speak to an agenda item, you want them speaking during that portion of the meeting, would be the desired. What you can do, and I've seen some people do it, say, well, I don't want to wait until it's a lengthy agenda, we're not going to get to it. I just want to make my comments during citizen presentation. Fine. You can make your comments during citizen's presentation, but by the way the citizen's presentation preamble is written, the board's not allowed to make comments on it. We're not allowed to interface with them. So that then becomes an issue. The encouragement is to make your comments with the agenda item as it's posted so that the board can keep those fresh in their mind rather than something that happened earlier.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, so.
So that's
I
the way
mean,
it's written.
Yeah, I guess when I think of this was different board and with different views on citizens' input and their willingness or desire to entertain and listen to that citizens' input. And again, I think it's governing to the exception and not the rule. So, I mean, I've kind of said my piece. Are there any other discussions on this? So, so we have the motion that's been seconded now. Anyone need the motion repeated? Or is everyone good?
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor of the motion as presented indicate by raising your hand. All opposed? Motion passes 4-1.
Congratulations, you on the island too.
Thank you. I'll cut your tires later.
Start playing the Gilligan's theme song.
Okay. Item number 9, consider and take appropriate action regarding the July 18 combined finance and variance report. A, combined financials, B, combined variance. Secretary Treasurer Flynn, please begin.
I have no real comments on those. The meeting notices both, I'll address B and C. I had no issues with. Actually, the special meeting notes D and E as well. As far as the check register, everything that I'm seeing seems to be in order. What I'm signing seems to be in order. So
It's in order.
it's in order. That's in order, Your Order.
I have a couple questions.
Vice President Rose, you have comments. That is
Yeah, I have,
unbelievable.
I have a couple questions. On page 125, Fire Department, unassigned fund balance, 522,253. On page 123, it says there's an assigned fund balance of the Fire Department of 228,621. Is that somewhere in this sheet somehow?
Are the pages? Are you saying the pages in the
132,
packet?
132 packet page.
132. Oh, you said 123.
I do, 132 on the packet. I'm on page 125 for the fire department balance sheet.
talking about the 228.
Yes,
That is the GASB part,
okay.
so that's gonna be,
Okay, so it's GASB, it's assigned, but it's not
correct,
carried on this
that's part of the
page?
81,000 that goes in each year for the, ladder truck replacement that we have right now.
Okay, but it's not carried on this fire department balance sheet then?
No, it is.
I think he wants to know where is it buried in? What is it buried in? Is it in the 228, 621?
It'd have to be in the
It's
643.
in the six, it's in the overall balance in there.
But it's not carried under fund balance, and it's an assigned fund balance.
That's the reason why I would have thought it would have been in the 228, 621.
Well, but I'm on page 125, the recap sheet. Is that where you're at?
Well, I was down at 132, looking at the balance sheet.
Oh, no, 125. There, I'm asking where's it at in here?
Ah,
What's in as far as going down for liability wise, let's see, go back to 125. Let me pull up the cash report real quick.
Okay, we can go on. We just, if you want to get back with me on it, that'll be fine. It was just something I discovered as I was going through some of the stuff.
Mr. President, I think along those lines, we've had some discussion about, the challenges of really looking at the overall fund balance / reserves versus what's
Yeah.
encumbered, what's not encumbered, those kind of things, and how can the staff really work to help that be transparent both to our board and to the public reviewing these myriad of documents. Stephen and I certainly agree there's some room for improvement there.
Oh,
How
I
about
was just trying to find it, yeah.
Yeah, how best to get there is an open challenge. You have a lot of pages, which require a lot of work.
Yeah.
And it's not clear that everybody looks at all 200 pages every month. So, is that, are we getting a good return on Stephen's time investment or not?
Yeah.
I think is a fair question.
So it's easier to look at the cash, sorry, it's actually in 137 part for a text pool. So every year it gets transferred back out, so it's in the GASB side, which is 137 and assigned. So it
Okay.
will not be in that 5, no.
Okay. Oh, come on.
If you wanna go down to page, 230, and you have your cash report. I'm sorry, 229.
did you have other questions?
No.
Okay.
I move to approve the combined financials and variance report.
We have a motion to approve the 2018 Combined Financials and Variance Report by Vice President Rose. Do I have a second?
Yeah, I second.
Seconded by Director Castaway. Any other discussion? Hearing none, indicate your approval by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, reports and updates. General Manager's monthly reports and updates, A through F.
Mr. President, I know everybody, including myself, are anxious to go, and we do have one very brief closed session item to deal with after this. Let me just say that in your packets is a report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that might arise from that. I have two things that I want to call out specifically. Number one, under regulatory update, we had no sanitary sewer overflows again since the last meeting, which is great. We did have 6 main breaks of various types. This was related, I think, to the changing soil conditions. One in particular created a lot of challenges. That was at 1040 Trophy Club Drive. On behalf of that particular homeowner, we submitted a claim to the Texas Municipal League. That claim came back rejected. It was a rejected insurance claim for them. During that time, however, the general manager authorized the installation of, well, I should say, let's start with the mucking out of water and mud from the home as a result of that main break, and further the installation of some drying fans and dehumidification equipment, which ran for approximately a week. The recommendation came back from TML that the claim be rejected. During that period of time, we ran up a bill of approximately $5,014 for the costs of helping to do the initial emergency cleanup and the dehumidification steps. We have been in contact with their insurance provider, who's taking care of the remainder of that challenge. In addition, we chose, so this was a main break that happened right under the homeowner's driveway. Rather than just do a repair, we chose to replace the entire pipe segment under the driveway, which is probably about 50-foot segment, maybe not quite 50, but in that,
Probably about, yeah.
say 30 to 50. But if there is another break, it's not going to happen under that driveway. I've further authorized that both the entry to the driveway, which was messed up as a result of the break, and well, in fact that we do put new concrete in for the entire 10 feet covered by our easement. So that was my call. I directed our contractor to go ahead and
Bless you.
replace the full 10 feet across our easement width, which is maybe a little more than we needed to do, but I felt like that was appropriate in this case, given the severity of the break. So I wanted to draw that to your attention. Secondly, I mentioned, this would be related to the wastewater treatment plant upgrade project. I mentioned that we might have a couple of small change orders coming forward, maybe just one. We'll see how that plays out. But there's a couple of things at play. Number one, just whether it's an omission or something we just flat missed in the original design, our front gate actuator at the wastewater plant is not on backup power. So when we go to generator power, we can't open the gate electronically. So that's just a rewiring thing we got to fix. It's not going to be a huge expense. It is likely that we'll be able to solve that problem at the same time that we bring power to a joint project that we're going to be proposing with the town to put, a kind of a in the town internet connection on point-to-point wireless. We're going to build a tower that would serve both the plant and the town's maintenance barn. Probably have 2 separate repeaters because we have to have separate networks, but it has a power requirement. And one good location to put that is pretty close to that front gate actuator. We'd also have to have a set of conduits, and we do have spare conduits to get a fiber all the way from the front gate into the admin control room. Now, one of the things that we've got to do there is we have construction trailers to the left as you enter the front gate. One of the last things that Weber Cadagua has to do, and our last pay request saw them somewhere in the vicinity of 97% paid out at this point, so we're getting close. One of the things they're going to do is yank out the trailer that the contractor is in currently, as well as the trailer that the electrical subcontractor is in, because they have to pave the road sufficient to kind of, well, be wide enough for whatever agreement was made with the town for that road that goes basically kind of along the edge of the golf course. So it's a pretty wide road, and the trailer is in the way of doing the final paving. For better or worse, there are some conduits under that road that are going to have to be either moved down or relocated outside the future roadway. So we're working with that right now. Hopefully that'll just be one change order that comes back September, October timeframe. But that would be a owner-initiated change order because we think this is the right time to do it, even though it wasn't contemplated as the original part of the project. And that's really all I had. I'm happy to answer any questions you have under the general manager's report on that or other items.
I've got one slight question. That break at Indian Creek and Harmony Park where the contractor, is it because we are not part of 811 or how did he manage to miss?
Well, let me say first off that we are almost a member of 811. So I've got the shapefile worked out. I just haven't got the paperwork done yet. We've got a few things to fix there. In that case, our staff have been told by the town that we have a contractor doing directional drilling effectively in the utility easement that's along those homes in that area. And we're going to be replacing pipe and road, I think, in that same area going forward after Phoenix is done. Our staff have been out and coordinated with that particular directional drilling operator. They hit it anyway. It's not an exact science, really. I mean, there's a certain amount of, you're a mole and you can't see where you're going. You might have the sensation that you have a control and you know where that cutter head's going, but that is not always the case. I've also been so we're going to be filing a claim against that contractor. Let me say that. I've been in touch with the town. We've got the name of the contractor that pulled the permit. There's another homeowner along the way whose yard has also been ripped up. They saw that their sprinkler system was broke by that project, and they saw a bill go up by over $100 in a given month just because the contractor hit their sprinkler system and it took a while to get it fixed. I've shared the contact, name for this contractor with that homeowner. Whether or not they want to pursue action for, what's effectively less than $100 will be up to them. But, unfortunately, I didn't see any basis upon which we should adjust their water bill because the contractor hit their sprinkler system. That didn't seem fair to the other ratepayers, although, these folks were told that this was going to be a nice, neat project and everything would go well, and they've faced some struggles. So we have to. Directional drilling has its challenges. We will be asking, once we get the bill back from our contractor, our invoice, we'll be passing that along to that contractor and trying to sort it out. We'll be doing the same thing with respect to the sound wall, which is probably more of an 811 question in general.
Any other questions or comment for the general manager? Vice President Rose?
Real quickly, on water bill versus water pumped. Pumping water like crazy. The difference between billed and pumped looks like we've misplaced 29 million gallons of water. That's ordinarily look at about 8–10%. That's up there. Is it something to do with the amount of water going through the lines and pressures, or have any ideas?
I would say some of that attributes to, we did have 6 main breaks.
So
which
those are
were-
included that too.
Those are included in that also.
Okay.
Another thing is, we do meter changeouts every year. Some of the older meters, they're probably running on the high side, throughout the summer. It may not be just, 100% accurate, but we do.
They'd be run on the low side.
Well,
Here,
running on
give
the
it, they're giving,
higher side
The
of
high
their-
side of their range, but generally speaking, meters die by under-reading.
yeah, that's what I mean, yeah. Okay,
Yeah, it depends on the perspective
Okay.
you're looking at it.
okay, so the meter changeout may help solve some of that.
Yeah, we have done our changeouts for this year.
Okay,
So we would expect to see some of this come back in the claims.
Probably not substantial monies, certainly, would not reflect, water losses from breaks, for example. It's pretty hard to quantify that. And I look at some other things too. One divergence you see there is that we had 2 breaks on the line that comes in from our 2 remote wells. And at least in one of those cases, the break wasn't that large, and Mike and his team chose to do that during daylight hours without paying overtime. So they let it leak for a little while, or at least turned off the pumps. But during that period of time, we brought more water in from Fort Worth, because it was We sold a lot of water last month.
But the line, water coming in from the pumps isn't recorded as pumped yet. It's recorded as pumped when it goes out of the tank, right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
But as it leaks, you know, we would show it coming from the wells, and so there's somewhere that's totaled. You know, I don't know if that gets included as water into the system, just like water in from Fort Worth. Even if there was a leak in that line that leaked for 12 or 14 hours, I think that would be treated just like water flowing in from Fort Worth, even though it wasn't making it to the tank.
Okay. Okay. I don't know where the sensors, you know, how you determine that. Okay, thank you.
No other questions?
No.
Vice President Rhodes?
No.
Okay. Pursuant to Section 551-071 of the Texas Open Meeting Act, the board may consult with this attorney in executive session on a matter in which the duty of the attorney to the governmental body under the disciplinary rules of professional conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with the Open Meeting Act, or to seek advice of counsel on legal matters involving pending or contemplated litigation or settlement offers. A, contractor breach performance and payment issues related to district contract with Weber Cadagua Partners for construction of the wastewater treatment plant improvements. And B, Trophy Club Municipal District Number 1 versus Arcadia Services LLC in the District Court of Tarrant County, 141 Judicial District, cost number 141-299-351-18. Item number 12, pursuant to Section 551-072 of the Texas Open Meeting Act, the board may deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if deliberations in an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the position of the governmental body and negotiations with the third party. A, district real property located at 100 Municipal Drive and 1501 Junction Way. It is 9:03. We will go into closed session or executive session. Okay, we will return back to regular session. It is 9:22. On item 13, there were no final decision, votes, or actions taken in the executive session. Item number 14, item for future agendas. Does anybody have anything?
Just next month will include, in order for adoption of your final tax rates for this tax year and a resolution for adoption of a fiscal year budget.
Did you get that?
Yeah, I already.
Budget before
Madam
tax rates.
Secretary?
Are we setting the subcommittee dates at some point in time?
We don't need to do that.
I asked that question, and I think Lori or maybe Tony told me that because it's a subcommittee, we don't need to set the date in this meeting.
In this
So-
meeting?
Yep.
Yeah,
So we can
more
just get 'em-
general question, I mean, do we did that sidebar?
I mean, Stephen, you can shoot us an email and we can commiserate on a time that's mutually beneficial.
I like the commiserate part.
Anything else for future agenda items? Next meeting date is set for Monday, September 17th at 6:30.
A question on that one.
Yes.
Isn't that the same date that we're having this?
Public hearing.
Yes,
Yes.
it's a public, we have
Be
it,
part of it.
public hearing
It's
as
gonna be
part of it.
it.
It'll be
Okay, I just
incorporated.
want to make sure they weren't considered two separate things we managed to overbook.
Nope,
Mr. President, as a heads up, I will be out that day, thinking of you in Ireland.
Oh, some people do, some people go a long ways to
that's
get
a
out of
blarney.
setting a tax.
It is a
right?
bunch of blarney, yes.
you mentioned raising race and the guy leaves the country.
I didn't want to leave the city, I figure I'm going all the way out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is pretty smart.
Already looking forward to his reelection.
Wow.
All right, any other comments, questions, snide remarks?
I move to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn.
I second.
It's been seconded to keep Director Rose quiet. All in favor indicate by raising your hands. Motion passes unanimously. Meeting closes at 9:24.
Okay,
You guys are
so the point,